smiled at Dr. Hawthorne's confident remark. What she'd said about him already being married to Evangeline sparked an idea. Of course, he wanted things to go differently with Eva, but he thought, why not support the claim with evidence? Then, later he could truly plan an elaborate wedding. One where she wouldn't be heavily pregnant with his child, for instance. His smile widened at the thought, and he planned to discuss it with Tom Hill the next day. Upon reaching the concierge medical unit, Andrew and Jake immediately noticed Charles's car parked not too far from the entrance. When Andrew parked, he saw Charles step out, but stayed by his car. Sharing a knowing look, Andrew and Jake guessed that Dr. Sterling must still be inside. The two men got out and opened the back doors for the women. Jake went to Dr. Hawthorne's side, while Andrew attended to Dr. Hart. Andrew offered Dr. Hart his hand to help her out, and she returned his warm smile with a shy one of her own. Next, Anita scooted over to the open door, and Andrew extended his hand to help her as well. After she was out, he closed the door and guided her away from the window, drawing her closer to the side of the Jeep. He leaned down, stealing a quick kiss, and she beamed up at him, his hooded gaze softened by the hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Anita asked in a hushed tone, her cheeks flushed with shyness. "I'm sure you don't need an answer to that," Andrew replied, making her giggle quietly. He leaned in again, cupping her back to pull her closer, the large car shielding them from view. On the other side of the car, Jake ensured Dr. Hawthorne reached the entrance of the concierge unit, before glancing back to see Evangeline appear from the opposite side. He extended his hand to her, and she quickened her pace, placing her hand in his. Jake raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss on the back of it. From the corner of his eye, he noticed Charles opening the back door of his Jeep, and just before ushering Evangeline inside, he saw Dr. Sterling step out of Charles's car. He smirked. On the other side of the field, Charles took a step back, his gaze traveling down Claire's figure, checking that everything was in place. His chest was still rising and falling from their recent intimacy, and hers was as well. He moved closer, reaching to tuck a loose strand of hair back into the bun at the nape of her neck. She looked perfectly put together after their wild moment, though her red, swollen lips gave them away. The sight stirred him again, and he leaned in, capturing her mouth with his, making her cling to him. "How long will the surgery take?" Charles murmured against her lips. "Theoretically, a fetal-to-uterus transplant should take about 6 to 12 hours, she replied. "And while it's never been done before, we have both Rowan and Dr. Everly Hawthorne here, and then there's little me. And Dr. Yen. So, I'd say 6 hours at most," she added, her tone filled with profound pride. Charles nodded, gently brushing his hand across her face, looking deeply into her eyes. "Why do you ask?" she questioned, her smile soft and uncertain. "I want to plan my shift so it aligns with yours," he answered with a grin. Claire giggled, feeling a spark of hope. "Then I'll see you in 6 hours, she said. He nodded, replying softly, "See you in 6 hours, baby," before kissing her again. At the concierge medical unit, Jake laced his fingers with Evangeline's as they followed Dr. Hawthorne, who first checked on Justin Graham and his son. Justin had been provided with a hospital bed placed at the foot of his son's, and now both were asleep. One of the nurses from Evergreen Memorial Hospital was there keeping watch. Aria smiled at her. Moving quietly, Dr. Hawthorne then continued down the hall to another privacy shield where Ethan and Isla lay asleep in the same bed. Ethan had slipped out of his bed to cuddle Isla, his left arm held in a cast, rested carefully at his side. The nurse assigned to them stood up upon seeing her, and Dr. Hawthorne gestured to him to sit back down as she stepped in to pull a blanket over Ethan and Isla without disturbing their IV line, then slipped back out and moved toward the privacy shield at the far end of the unit. The space where Samuel and Sean Cavalier had once been stationed was now cleared, transformed into a large operating space, with the BioSync womb incubator placed beside the operating bed. Rowan, Yen, and Dr. Williams were already there. Rowan and Williams were preparing surgical instruments and arranging the setup, while Yen was noting the fetus's vitals. Dr. Hawthorne's face brightened with satisfaction at the sight. She first walked over to Yen to give her a hug. then to Rowan, stretching up to place a grateful kiss on his cheek and saying, "Thank you," before moving to Dr. Williams. Andrew and Charles, who had each escorted their partners, watched as Dr. Hawthorne gave Rowan a quick peck on the cheek, then did the same for Dr. Williams to show her appreciation. While Dr. Williams laughed with a shy blush, Rowan placed his hand over the spot she'd kissed, gazing after her with a long-suffering expression. Unnoticed by Rowan, Andrew, Jake, and Charles had seen his reaction and were now glaring in his direction. "Who are you giving that look, honey? Lighten up or you'll end up scaring everyone away," Anita teased Andrew in a low tone, unaware of what had happened, and reached up to plant a kiss on his jawline. "Dr. Hart?" Dr. Hawthorne called, drawing Jake's attention. "Yes, Doctor," Evangeline replied. "We're ready whenever you are," Dr. Hawthorne said with a warm smile. Evangeline nodded, her heart skipping a beat, her eyes shifting up to meet Jake's. Jake's heart started pounding, an unusual wave of fear taking over him at that announcement. It was time. "Eva," Anita called, wanting to get her attention, her voice soft and warm. When Evangeline glanced her way, Anita added, "Come on, let's get you ready." Evangeline nodded again but looked back at Jake. Jake pulled her close, pressing his face into the curve of her neck, ignoring everyone else around them, and whispered, "Please remember, I'll be here, right by your side through it all. So please, come back to me." Eva clung to him, unable to say a word, managing only to nod in response. Charles and Andrew patted Jake on the back, signaling that it was time for him to let Dr. Hart go. With a reluctant nod, Jake stepped back, and Anita gently wrapped her fingers around Evangeline's forearm, guiding her away from him. Anita and Dr. Sterling led Evangeline to a secluded corner of the unit to prepare for the groundbreaking procedure. Anita helped her clean up while Dr. Sterling laid out a sterile hospital gown, which Evangeline slipped into, her face a mixture of apprehension and resolve. "You'll be just fine," Anita murmured reassuringly. Evangeline nodded, though she could feel her entire body quivering with nerves. Once she was ready, they assisted her into a wheelchair and rolled her back to the prepared operating area. When they reached the table, Jake offered her a reassuring smile and moved a step closer, but Anita gently stopped him, gesturing towards the cleaning station for him to scrub up. He nodded and quickly headed over to comply. Anita and Dr. Sterling continued forward, helping Evangeline settle onto the bed. Dr. Hawthorne moved to her side and asked, "Would you like to be awake for the procedure? And if you don't mind, could we record this for our records? It would be invaluable for future reference." Evangeline took a deep breath, then nodded. "Yes, I'd prefer to stay awake. And I don't mind it being recorded as long as I remain anonymous," she replied, her voice sounding small and shaky. Dr. Hawthorne acknowledged her request with a nod, then turned to Andrew. "Would you mind handling the recording?" In response, Andrew immediately pulled out his smartphone, positioning himself unobtrusively. "Just let me know when to start," he said. "Thank you, Andrew," Dr. Hawthorne said, exchanging a glance with Rowan. He nodded, and the two stepped away to sanitize their hands. When they returned, fully geared for the procedure, Dr. Sterling positioned herself beside Dr. Hawthorne, while Dr. Williams monitored Evangeline's vitals. Anita and Dr. Yen stood close, ready to assist as needed. "Time," Dr. Hawthorne called out. 12 midnight, Charles replied. "Perfect." Dr. Hawthorne confirmed and then said, "Andrew?" to confirm he was ready. "All set," Andrew responded. "Scalpel," Dr. Hawthorne requested, holding out her hand to Anita as Yen exposed Dr. Hart's abdomen, cleaning the area in preparation for the incision. Dr. Hawthorne took the scalpel and made the incision, carefully working her way through the layers until she exposed the uterus. "Forceps," she instructed, extending her hand, which Anita immediately filled. Dr. Hawthorne then eased the forceps into place, gradually opening the uterine cavity. "Get the fetus ready," Dr. Hawthorne said. Rowan immediately handed over to Dr. Yen and joined Dr. Sterling by the BioSync womb incubator, a sleek, high-tech pod softly illuminated, with readouts indicating vital statistics for the fetus it currently housed. "Ready," Rowan called out. "Go time," Anita responded when Arya gave a thumbs up. Rowan nodded to Dr. Sterling, and counting to 3, they pulled the biosync womb incubator open. Dr. Sterling carefully lifted the tiny fetus, and Rowan detached the baby, still surrounded by a transparent sac of amniotic fluid, from the incubator's artificial umbilical connection. Dr. Hawthorne leaned over Evangeline with a reassuring smile. "This will feel like deep pressure, but you shouldn't feel any sharp pain." Jake, who had settled beside her and was holding one of her hands, squeezed gently in reassurance. Evangeline nodded, eyes wide as she breathed. She was terrified, but she did her best to mask it. Although she knew she was surrounded by the best medical practitioners, she still felt a slight tinge of fear that something might go wrong. Dr. Rowan and Dr. Sterling quickly prepared the fetus. Knowing time was of the essence, the two moved swiftly yet carefully to the bed to begin transferring the fetus into Evangeline's uterus. Dr. Sterling deftly prepared the uterine lining to receive the embryo, with Dr. Yen by her side offering the necessary assistance. First, the team made sure the placenta was aligned and carefully attached within the womb, using a bioadaptive gel to aid in bonding. Dr. Sterling gently positioned the fetus, while Dr. Hawthorne stabilized the structure, carefully easing it into place. Dr. Williams kept a close eye on Evangeline's vitals, announcing periodic updates to keep the team informed. After what seemed like an eternity of concentrated silence, Dr. Hawthorne's voice broke through. "The attachment is complete. Let's monitor for stability." Dr. Yen hurried to Evangeline's IV to adjust and administer fluids that would help ease the transition. With the fetus now securely implanted in Evangeline's uterus, the team waited with bated breath for the fetus and Evangeline's vitals to stabilize, their eyes fixed on the monitors. Jake had never experienced anything so intensely frightening and fascinating. He could hear his own heartbeat as he held Evangeline's hand, pressing the back of it to his lips, praying to the heavens for any intervention that could give him this one beautiful miracle. He heard Evangeline take a shaky breath, and as their eyes met, he could see the fear in hers. He could feel her trembling, and he squeezed her hand gently, hoping to silently convey that everything would be fine, even though deep down, he was terrified too. After several minutes of nothing but the quiet beep of the monitors, Dr. Williams gave a subtle nod, signaling that everything was proceeding smoothly. "It looks good from over here," the older man said in a hesitant tone. Andrew wasn't entirely sure, but he thought he saw Dr. Hawthorne glance at Anita, who then moved to join Dr. Williams. She hovered nearby, attempting to seem occupied, but then exchanged a discreet nod with Dr. Hawthorne. Andrew grinned, impressed by the two friends. It seemed the incident with Isla would haunt Dr. Williams from now on, as Dr. Hawthorne would always double-check his reports. Dr. Hawthorne looked down at Evangeline, a smile of profound relief on her face. It's done. The transfer was a success. Only then did Evangeline allow herself to truly feel. A flood of relief washed over her. Her lips trembled and her eyes filled with tears as she shifted her gaze to Jake. Jake couldn't speak. He pressed a kiss to Evangeline's lips, then to her forehead, trying to control his emotions as Dr. Hawthorne closed the incision. "You did it," Jake murmured against her skin, his hold tightening around her. Andrew noted that Dr. Hawthorne could have let Dr. Sterling or Dr. Yen take over the incision, but she did it herself, and he observed how carefully she worked. Anita, watching closely, knew Arya was focused on making the incision with such care that it had a flawless finish, one that even a plastic surgeon would have been proud of, ensuring the cut would heal with minimal scarring. Once she finished, Dr. Hawthorne and Dr. Yen, with Anita's assistance, carefully bandaged Evangeline. Arya then moved to the IV line to recheck the administered medication before reviewing the monitor to assess both Evangeline's vitals and the fetus. "Andrew, are you still recording?" Dr. Hawthorne asked. "Yes, Doctor," Andrew responded. "You can rest now." "Thank you," she said. Andrew lowered his hand. Arya observed the monitor, relieved to see it confirming the procedure had been successful, though they would need to keep monitoring to ensure it stayed that way. "What time is it now?" she asked. 5 a.m., Dr. Hawthorne, Charles answered with a proud smile. "All right then. We can all take a break. Well done, everyone. Arya praised as she started to head towards the exit path, but Rowan chuckled, adding, "Come on now, let's give it up for Dr. Everly Hawthorne for being outstanding, as always." Arya halted her strides to face him and quickly interjected in a hushed tone, "We have patients resting, please," causing a ripple of light chuckles to spread through the enclosed space. Jake got up, crossed the room to where Dr. Hawthorne was, and gathered her into a tight hug. "Thank you," he muttered into her hair. Arya patted him on the back. When he drew back, she smiled up at him. "Now we just have to keep an eye on her," she said. He nodded in acknowledgement. Jake thanked the rest of the team, then approached Evangeline, who looked exhausted and was beginning to drift to sleep. He gently pressed a kiss on her forehead before hurrying out, wanting a moment to himself. Once outside, he could feel tears on his face. He couldn't believe Dr. Hawthorne had actually done the surgery and that Evangeline had held on just as she'd promised. Looking up to the sky, he muttered, "Thank you." Meanwhile, Dr. Sterling was struggling with the smell of antiseptic, which was making her stomach churn. She swallowed softly, discreetly pressing a hand to her stomach, trying to calm herself, but a rush of heat enveloped her, and she knew she had to leave before anyone noticed. "Excuse me," she murmured to Anita and Dr. Yen, her voice low and tight. She then forced herself to stride across the partition space towards the exit, noting Charles standing there. She fought to keep herself steady. "Are you okay?" Charles asked, noticing she looked a bit pale. "Yes, thanks," she replied with a quick smile, striding past him without waiting to chat. Charles watched her leave, his brows furrowed, and made a move to follow her, sensing something was off. But a sudden gasp from inside caught his attention. "Anita?" Andrew called out, seeing her bend over to hold onto the edge of a table, but her grip slipped and her body swayed unsteadily. Andrew rushed towards her, hurrying to catch her before she could fall. "Babe?" Andrew asked with concern, his voice laced with worry. Arya hurried to join them. "Anita?" she called, concern etched on her face. "Bring her out here," Dr. Yen called out, and Andrew immediately lifted Anita from the operating area. Arya followed them out and to the open space. "She might just need some air," Dr. Yen reassured, noticing how worried Dr. Hawthorne and the big guy, Andrew, looked. Once Andrew placed her on an available empty bed, Dr. Hawthorne, Dr. Yen and Dr. Williams quickly started to check her vitals. "I think it's likely a fainting spell," Dr. Yen said, glancing at Andrew. "Let's elevate her legs a bit. It'll help with circulation." Andrew quickly followed her instructions, gently lifting Anita's legs onto a small support. After a few moments, she stirred awake, blinking up at Andrew's anxious face before glancing over to Arya. "What happened?" she murmured. "You fainted and scared the hell out of us," Arya replied, her worry etched on her face and clouding her voice. "What? I never faint," Anita said, protesting, then tried to sit up. Andrew gave Dr. Hawthorne and Dr. Yen a helpless look, clearly hoping for confirmation that she was all right. "Don't even think about getting up. You're getting a full checkup," Dr. Hawthorne said firmly. Anita scowled. "I'm fine." "You fainted, Anita," Arya retorted, still shaken. With a resigned sigh, Anita lay back. "Fine." Arya took a deep, calming breath, and Andrew continued to watch Anita closely. "Babe, I'm fine, I promise," Anita assured him softly, noting his keen scrutiny. Dr. Yen offered Andrew a comforting smile. "We'll take some blood and run a few quick tests to be sure," she said to ease his fears. Andrew nodded as he held Anita's hand. Charles took a chair close to Andrew, who thanked him before sitting down. "When was the last time you had your period?" Dr. Yen asked. Anita frowned, trying to remember, and then her eyes widened as she glanced at Arya and Andrew. Outside, Dr. Sterling hurried toward the main exit of the unit. The moment she stepped outside, she gasped for air, relieved to escape the sensory overload. But as soon as she felt a slight reprieve, a fresh wave of nausea hit her, and she stumbled further into the cold, needing to get far enough away. Finally, her stomach rebelled and she emptied its contents, feeling lightheaded and overwhelmed. Straightening up, she spotted Jake hurrying toward her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Claire cursed inwardly. "I'm fine, thanks. I just needed some fresh air," she quickly replied. "Are you sure? Let me get—" he started, moving toward the concierge unit to get help. "No!" she cried, making him stop. Jake turned a bemused gaze toward her. Claire let out a shaky breath. "I'm fine, I promise. Please, don't tell anyone." she pleaded softly. Jake's expression grew more puzzled, but he nodded slowly. Jake wasn't entirely sure what he had stumbled upon, but Dr. Sterling's pale face, worried expression, and subtle panic, along with her insistence that he shouldn't get help or tell anyone he'd seen her being sick, raised immediate concerns. He knew she'd been seeing Charles for a while now, and the first thought that came to mind was that the doctor might be pregnant. Still, a small part of him wondered if she was simply unwell and didn't want Dr. Hawthorne knowing she was sick, and had joined her in the operating room anyway. The thought unnerved him, so he asked, "You don't have any kind of contagious illness, do you?" She shook her head. Jake nodded, reassured, and concluded that his initial guess was probably right. He started to stride towards her, reached into his pocket for a handkerchief, and offered it. She took it with a nod of gratitude. "Come now," Jake said, gently reaching for her forearm. "It's freezing out here." He then guided her toward Andrew's car. When they reached it, he thought to go inside for the keys, but found that the door was unlocked and the key was still in the ignition. He opened the front passenger door, and Claire slipped inside, closing her eyes as she rested her head against the seat's headrest for a bit, before opening them to gaze out of the window. Jake shut the door, then walked around to the driver's side. Claire didn't like being discovered by Jake Darfield. He was one of Charles's closest friends. Charles even referred to him as a brother. She knew there was a reason why Jake was second in command. The man was no fool. He must have guessed her predicament, and she doubted he'd be willing to keep a secret like this for her. To him, she was nothing more than the girl his friend was sleeping with. He had no loyalty to her whatsoever. "Tell me what I can do," Jake offered once he settled into the driver's seat. "There's really not much you can do. It's something I'll have to endure for the next few weeks at least," she replied. Jake smiled, casting a sidelong glance her way. "Are you planning to tell him?" Jake asked, his voice low and hesitant. It took Claire a moment to respond. She turned to look at him, meeting his light blue eyes, a stark contrast to his jet black hair. "I'm not sure if this was what he signed up for," she said, trying to make light of the situation. Jake shrugged. "He's not stupid. I'm sure he knows how babies are made," he quipped, making Claire chuckle. She was certain he did, and he was very good at it. "I'm a gynecologist, Jake," she replied. Jake raised an eyebrow. "I didn't realize that made you superhuman and immune to common mistakes," he remarked. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. "Perhaps I'm just being selfish then," she said quietly. "How so?" Jake prompted. "I don't want to lose him," she said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "So then what's your plan? You don't sound like you want to end the pregnancy, so you must want the baby, right?" Jake asked, giving her a searching look. "More than anything. You have no idea," she said, releasing a shaky breath as tears spilled from her eyes. "I thought I couldn't have a child," she added softly. "That was what made me a little careless." Jake studied her, curious about the story behind her words, but unwilling to pry. "Telling him you're expecting his child won't make him stop wanting you, Dr. Sterling. Take it from a man who's known Charles for nearly 20 years, Jake assured her. "I don't want to do that to him. Force him into a family he never planned for," she replied, her voice trembling. "He's not a spring chicken, Dr. Sterling," Jake reminded her, making her chuckle despite her tears. "If you want my advice, I tell you to tell him. Don't deprive him of the joy of knowing he helped create a miracle." "Not telling him is what would make you lose him, Dr. Sterling," Jake said. Claire took a deep breath and nodded. "What do you need right now?" Jake asked with a gentle smile. "To brush my teeth, take a bath, eat something that won't make my stomach rebel, and take a long rest in Charles's arms," she quipped. "Well, it's your lucky day, Dr. Sterling. I know how to make things happen around here. In fact, I get paid for it," Jake quipped, making her laugh. He started the car and pulled away. "Where are we going?" Claire asked, smiling. "You'll see," he replied, giving her a mysterious smile. A short while later, Jake parked at the back of the Hawthorne building, then hurried around to help her out. He guided her up the porch steps and into the kitchen, grateful for the warmth that immediately enveloped them, a sharp contrast to the biting cold they had just left behind. Jake was relieved the kitchen hadn't started filling up yet. Only Miss Jonas and 3 kitchen staff members were present, already laying out an extravagant spread for breakfast. Freshly baked croissants and pastries lined the counter, their buttery aroma filling the air. A platter of smoked salmon and bagels sat next to bowls of fresh berries and melon, while an assortment of cheeses and cured meats were neatly arranged on a polished wooden board. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the scent of freshly squeezed orange juice completed the luxurious scene. "Hello there," Miss Jonas greeted, her eyes darting curiously from Jake to Dr. Sterling. Jake and Claire returned her greeting, and Jake explained, "Dr. Sterling's having trouble keeping food down. Do you have anything special she might be able to eat?" Miss Jonas met his gaze, holding it a moment before giving him a polite, somewhat forced smile. "Of course, Mr. Darfield. I know just the thing." Jake nearly rolled his eyes. "Great. She'll be upstairs in Charles's old room," he replied, returning her smile with a similarly insincere one. He watched as Miss Jonas blinked, her eyes flickering with a flash of understanding. "In that case, let me take over from here," Miss Jonas said, gently reaching for Dr. Sterling and guiding her toward the kitchen exit. "Thank you, Jake," Claire called, glancing back over her shoulder with a grateful smile. Jake nodded, waiting until they disappeared before heading back outside to the car. On his way back to the concierge medical unit, Jake debated whether to tell Charles or let Dr. Sterling handle it herself. By the time he parked and stepped out of the car, he had decided it was best to let her tell him on her own terms. As he made his way inside, he spotted Charles heading toward him, brows furrowed with a look of confusion. "Have you seen Claire, man?" Charles asked. Jake patted Charles on the chest with a suggestive grin and replied, "She's with Mrs. Jonas." Charles's brows furrowed at the reply. Earlier, when he had gone in search of Claire, he had seen the tail light of Andrew's Jeep leaving the unit. Since Andrew was inside with Anita, and Jake had disappeared too, he had suspected that Claire might be with Jake, but he had dismissed it, wondering why the hell Jake would be taking Claire anywhere when he was right there. "Why?" Charles asked, narrowing his gaze. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Jake shot back. "I don't know, Jake. Why did you take my girlfriend to the boss's house when you could have come to get me?" Charles retorted. "She wasn't feeling so well and needed food," Jake explained. Charles's eyes darkened further with anger. "Don't you think that's a damn good reason why you should have come to get me, Darfield?" he snapped. "Charles, instead of going on about this, why don't you fucking join her, huh?" Jake said, turning to leave. "What's going on? Did she tell you anything? And don't bother lying to me. I know you wouldn't have left here when Evangeline is in there without something serious coming up." "Is she leaving me, man?" Charles probed, his voice tight with concern. Jake's eyes widened in surprise. "First off, what? Second, what? You sound pretty insecure, and this isn't the Charles I know," Jake said in disbelief. "What is going on, Jake?" Charles demanded through gritted teeth. "I can't tell you. She needs to tell you herself, and right now she needs you. So stop being weird and go join her." "I told Miss Jonas to help take care of her and take her to your old room," Jake replied. Charles's brows furrowed, his heart sinking with fear. "Take care of her?" he repeated, silently noting Jake had said she needed food. Charles remembered that Claire had looked pale and a bit unsteady on her feet when she had walked past him earlier. He thought perhaps the whole surgery thing had taken a toll on her. Jake watched as Charles processed the situation, the wheels turning in his head. He almost laughed, knowing it wouldn't take long for Charles to figure it out, but still wanted him to hear it from Claire. "Don't hurt your brain by thinking too much. Go meet her," Jake said, walking away. Charles instantly deduced that Jake didn't seem worried about Claire. For some reason, the scene from his Jeep the night before replayed in his mind the moment when he had cupped her chest and she had flinched. His heart rate quickened as he pulled out his phone, turned and ran to his car. Settling into the driver's seat, he Googled possible ailments that could cause sensitivity in certain body parts. His eyes locked on one result, and Jake's words echoed in his head. His mind raced as he pieced together fragments of memories of Claire. Things he hadn't let himself fully acknowledge. The way she'd been acting lately, the subtle signs, the changes that didn't make sense until now. Her mood swings had become more frequent, shifting from moments of intense affection to unexpected bouts of distance. She would cling to him in the evenings, seeking more cuddle time, her body pressed against his as if trying to absorb his warmth, her face buried in his chest. but sometimes she'd withdraw, retreating into herself, her eyes distant, like she was somewhere far away. He'd catch her giving him long, emotional stares, eyes full of unspoken thoughts she didn't realize he was noticing. Then there were the times when, after they made love, she'd cry, soft, unbidden tears that she quickly wiped away as though ashamed of them. Her sensitivity had intensified too. Dear God, he muttered to himself. Early on, as Dr. Yen questioned Anita while also trying to reassure both him and Dr. Hawthorne that there was nothing serious happening with Anita, Andrew struggled to keep his fear in check, thinking Dr. Hawthorne was doing a good enough job for both of them. But when Anita looked into his eyes and assured him that she was fine, Andrew realized he wasn't doing a great job of staying calm either. But then this was his wife, his Anita, and she was right in saying she had never fainted before. She was one of the strongest women he knew. She might not be as tough or skilled as G.I. Joe, but she was still strong. He couldn't remember a time when she had felt under the weather or complained about being weak, which made her sudden collapse all the more terrifying. "When was the last time you had your period?" Dr. Yen asked, and Andrew's heart almost stopped. "What?" The word echoed in his mind. His heart began to race, but this time it was different. It wasn't from fear, but pure, unadulterated joy. Anita darted a glance at Dr. Hawthorne, who had gone suddenly quiet with widened eyes, then turned those beautiful coffee-brown eyes toward him. The way her eyes gleamed as she pondered the question told him she hadn't considered this possibility before, but it was clearly something she was now seriously thinking about. Andrew instantly imagined having a son with her. Dark brown eyes, richly textured curls, golden tan skin that gleamed beautifully under the sun like a demigod. His heart shook in the wall of his chest. "Let's hurry up with that scan." Dr. Hawthorne's voice broke through the haze of excitement and joy building inside him. Her voice was laced with contained excitement, and her eyes already gleamed with joy. However, Anita scowled at Andrew. "You just have to ruin it for me, don't you?" Anita snapped, narrowing her eyes at Andrew as she sat up on the bed. "I know you're against us partying and hiring male strippers, so then you plant your giant baby inside me." Andrew fought back a laugh. She always had that effect on him, making him laugh, bringing joy into his life, and reminding him that there was more to life than his career. Even though her eyes were shooting daggers at him, he wanted nothing more than to kiss her, his little spitfire. Dr. Hawthorne, unable to hold it in, burst into a fit of giggles, earning a glare from Anita as well. "You think this is funny? He just ruined everything," Anita grumbled. "Let's slow down until we have some results," Dr. Yen suggested, but she too was met with a glare. She raised her hand in surrender as Dr. Rowan and Dr. Williams moved the ultrasound contraption closer to the bed. "I'm sure you won't be showing by the time we do the bachelorette party," Dr. Hawthorne reassured with a laugh. "And there's plenty of sparkling wine that's safe for pregnant women." She took the bottle of water Dr. Yen handed her, unscrewed it, and made Anita drink it all. "No, Ariana," Anita protested, sipping the water. "We planned to get drunk and have stupid fun, and now he's gone and ruined it." She burst into tears after she finished drinking the water. Dr. Hawthorne grinned widely. "Oh, you are so pregnant," she cooed. Andrew's face stretched into a happy grin. "I was supposed to wear a sexy dress. I planned everything," Anita sobbed. Andrew continued to smile as Dr. Hawthorne perched on the edge of the bed and gently pulled Anita into a hug, giving her a friendly pat on the back. "We'll find a way to cheat our way around it, honey, I promise," Dr. Hawthorne said reassuringly. "But it wouldn't be the same, though," Anita sobbed, her voice tinged with frustration. "And coffee, I wouldn't be able to drink that poison for months, Ariana." Despite her distress, the room couldn't help but stifle laughter. "All right, let's confirm," Dr. Yen said calmly. Dr. Hawthorne helped Anita lie back on the bed, pulling a blanket up to cover her legs. Carefully, Dr. Yen lifted Anita's dress to expose her stomach, and Dr. Hawthorne assisted in cleaning the area before applying ultrasound gel. Dr. Yen took over, gently spreading the gel on Anita's belly with the scan pad. Andrew stood glued to her side, his anxious gaze fixed on the monitor, while everyone else in the room watched with bated breath. A moment later, Dr. Yen caught the unmistakable sound of a heartbeat, Dr. Hawthorne couldn't contain her excitement, letting out an ecstatic squeal. Without a second thought, she wrapped Anita in a tight hug. "My bestie is going to have a tiny miracle," she exclaimed. Anita giggled, then turned to Andrew, her eyes softening. "I'm still angry with you, but I love you so much," she whispered to him. Andrew stood frozen, overwhelmed with emotion, until Dr. Hawthorne stepped back. He moved closer, cupped Anita's neck, and took her lips in a slow, searing kiss. Dr. Hawthorne chuckled quietly as Anita, with her arms wrapped around Andrew's neck, completely surrendered to the kiss, blocking out everyone else in the room. Dr. Yen, watching them, felt a blush creep onto her cheeks at the sight of Andrew kissing Anita so passionately. "The baby is 12 weeks old," Dr. Yen said, her voice soft and low, not wanting to break the intimate moment. "Thank you, Yen," Dr. Hawthorne replied, beaming with joy. "Let's print the results," she added, her voice laced with excitement. In the privacy shield at the far end of the unit where Isla and Ethan were, Isla slowly stirred awake, feeling herself wrapped in the familiar warmth of Ethan's embrace. Her heart swelled with emotion as she reveled in the comfort he had enveloped her in. Her head rested under his chin, her body curled into his arms, both of them covered by a blanket. As her eyes fluttered open, her heart skipped a beat when she realized that the darkness she had been seeing was no longer absolute. Though her vision remained blurry and distorted, it wasn't the pitch-black void it had been. Hope surged within her, a quiet belief growing that Dr. Hawthorne's diagnosis might be correct. Maybe in a few days, she will indeed be able to see again. She craned her neck, listening to Ethan's steady breathing, trying to deduce if he was awake, eager to tell him the good news. However, as she shifted, she inadvertently brushed against his groin and felt him move his hand to the side of her hip. Hesitant, she freed her own hand to touch the one he laid over her hip and noticed that it was encased in a cast. Her heart tightened with emotion at the reminder of his injury. She heard Ethan's breath catch, his body responding to her movement, his breathing quickening as he lifted the hem of her gown. Isla silently prayed they were alone, for if anyone else was around, it wouldn't matter. Whether in a hospital or not, Ethan seemed determined to make the moment something much more intimate. Isla's heart skipped again when she heard a throat clear, but Ethan didn't stop. Then she heard a sigh followed by a muttered, "I should get coffee," accompanied by the sound of shuffling feet, as if the person was about to leave. All the while, Ethan didn't stop. Instead, he smoothly slid a folded knee between her legs, sending Isla's pulse racing in anticipation. She wasn't completely certain, but she had a strong feeling he was still asleep. His breathing remained deep and steady, slow and rhythmic in a way that suggested he was lost in some unconscious instinct rather than fully awake. Back at the Hawthorne household, Nathaniel woke up to the sound of the shower running. His eyes shifted to the untouched space beside him on the bed, a reminder that Aria had spent the night at the concierge medical unit. A familiar ache pulsed in his chest where his incision was healing, and he slowly got up, feet touching the floor as he made his way to the bathroom door. Peering inside, he saw Aria under the warm spray. His body tightened at the sight of her, and he began counting the days since their triplets were born. He was certain if he didn't have his wife soon, he would burst with the sheer force of his hunger for her. Pushing open the door, he caught her attention, and she turned to face him. His gaze trailed over her, briefly resting on her chest before meeting her eyes. "Good morning, my love." She greeted him with a soft smile, her gaze tender and adoring, setting his insides alight with need. "I have some wonderful news to share with you," she said, barely able to contain her happiness. "Uh-huh," Nathaniel replied, slipping out of his pajama pants, making her eyes widen as he stepped into the shower with her. "First, tell me, honey, how many days has it been since we had the triplets?" His dark grey eyes sparkled with intent, and Aria didn't need him to spell out his reasons for asking. She took a step back, her voice low and teasing. "Nathan," she said, her tone a low, playful warning. "Come on, beautiful, let's count together," he murmured with a smouldering grin. Aria gave a nervous laugh, her cheeks warming in anticipation. After Jake left Charles, he was on his way back to the privacy shield where Evangeline was when he noticed that the doctors had moved to another area where hushed voices of excitement made him change course. Curiosity piqued. He headed in that direction, wondering what was going on. When he reached the entrance, his brows furrowed as he saw Miss Anita now lying on the hospital bed, with Dr. Yen and Dr. Hawthorne performing a pelvic scan on her. The room grew quiet, a tense anticipation filling the air as everyone seemed to be waiting for something. Jake moved closer, and his ears picked up the faint beating of a heart. Dr. Hawthorne squealed in delight, prompting chuckles from Rowan and Dr. Williams. What she said next made a broad smile stretch across Jake's face. Andrew was going to be a father just like he was. And then there was Charles. He chuckled at the surreal coincidence, thinking this would be the best end-of-year gift ever. Slowly he retreated, not wanting to intrude on the intimate moment between the couple, and made his way back to Evangeline's privacy shield. He wondered what Nathaniel Hawthorne would have to say about the news. Now they'd all have to move out of the Hawthorne Guards apartment building and find a larger space. The thought of them all splitting up didn't sit well with Jake. He worried it wouldn't be ideal for security, so he began to consider the possibility of purchasing nearby land. They could offer a sum that the current owners couldn't refuse and build a kind of fortress for themselves in the city. He thought he'd run the idea by Tom Hill. If anyone could bring this vision to life, it was the cunning old fox, Tom Hill. Entering Evangeline's privacy shield, Jake found one of the nurses from Evergreen Memorial Hospital there. She threw him a polite smile of acknowledgement as she continued checking Evangeline's vitals. Jake sat down beside the bed, noting that they'd moved her from the operating table to a more comfortable hospital bed. She looked peaceful in her sleep, and the gentle curve of her stomach stirred a deep emotion within him. He still couldn't believe she'd gone and done this. Taking her hand, he pressed a kiss on the back of it, his gaze roaming over her beautiful face with intensity. "Thank you, baby," he whispered, his heart swelling with love. The soft beeping of the monitor caught his attention, and he looked at the digital imaging that the nurse was setting up. He watched in awe as the translucent image of the baby in Evangeline's womb appeared. The nurse smiled to herself as she watched the baby move, and the digital monitor displayed the baby's vitals. A familiar logo in the corner of the screen made Jake grin. Nathaniel was going to make them all trillionaires before he retired if he kept inventing medical gadgets that hospitals couldn't resist buying. Jake's focus shifted back to the baby, watching as the little one settled in, sucking his thumb. He hadn't realized he had tears in his eyes until the nurse handed him a tissue. He chuckled, taking it and wiping his eyes. "It's quite something watching a miracle in real time," she commented. Jake could only nod in agreement. Ethan woke up to a thrilling rush of delicious sensation and the softness of Isla's mouth against his. A sharp jolt of pain traveled up his left arm as he instinctively gripped her hip, gasping as he became aware of their position and what he'd been doing. "You've got to be kidding me," he thought, trying to steady his breathing while Isla slowly pulled back from the kiss. "Ethan?" she whispered softly. "Christ!" he muttered, glancing around and exhaling in relief upon realizing they were alone. "Isla, I'm so sorry," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'm not," she replied, making him chuckle softly before he captured her lips once more. "Then I should probably finish what I started," Ethan quipped with a grin. "Good idea. It'd make the scandal worthwhile, Mr. Blackwood," she teased, drawing a groan from him. "Someone saw us?" he asked. "Pretty sure of it," she replied in a whisper, and Ethan leaned in, his lips finding hers again. Afterward, catching his breath, he murmured, "I'm asking for us to be moved back to the house today." Isla's soft laugh filled the room, and he felt a surge of happiness to see her in such high spirits. "I didn't get to wish you a good morning," he said, pressing another kiss to her lips. "Good morning, beautiful. How are you feeling today?" he asked, his eyes full of care. Isla beamed, her excitement unmistakable. "I think Dr. Hawthorne was right about my vision, Ethan," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "It's not pitch black anymore. I can see shadows," she whispered emotionally. Ethan drew a shaky breath. His joy and relief was so profound that it rendered him speechless. He pulled her close, his lips pressing firmly against hers. Words failed him, but Isla, though unable to see, felt the tremor in his body, and her heart swelled with love for him. Meanwhile, Charles, who had gone after Claire, hurried up the back porch of the Hawthorne building and headed towards the kitchen. He wasn't entirely sure how he should feel, especially with the latest looming threat in mind. He hadn't really given much thought to starting a family, though he had considered a long-term future with Claire. His thoughts had mainly focused on companionship and mutual physical comfort, rather than anything as serious as family. In hindsight, he realized that had been short-sighted, since it was always a possibility since they were lovers. Still, he reminded himself that she was a medical professional, a gynecologist, no less. If she hadn't wanted the pregnancy, she likely would have taken steps to prevent it. That led him to wonder if Dr. Claire Sterling had truly considered starting a family with him. Was this something she wanted out of love and commitment, or had it simply been an accident? He felt a knot of nerves about the impending conversation ahead and hoped they could find a positive path forward. Entering the kitchen, Charles saw Miss Jonas sitting on one of the tall stools, nursing a cup of coffee, while the other kitchen staff chatted as they worked. He made his way to her side, and the older woman gave him a sidelong glance before her face broke into a smile. "I hear you boss's favorites have been getting busy with your ladies, huh?" she teased, waggling her eyebrows. Charles burst into laughter. Though his brows quickly furrowed into a playful frown, his light brown eyes gleaming with mischief. "Boss's favorites, huh? Tell me more," he replied, making Miss Jonas laugh even harder. "Nice try dodging that, but there's no getting out of this one, buddy. Your lady's fine and resting upstairs in your room," she informed him. Charles smiled, wrapping his arms around her and pressing a grateful kiss on her forehead. "You're a gem," he murmured. Miss Jonas patted him lightly on the chest as he drew back. "Be gentle with that one, all right? She's a bit fragile," she advised, her words adding a new layer of nervousness for Charles. A few minutes later, he was at the door to his room. Without knocking, he opened it and peeked inside. The expansive room was bathed in soft, shadowy light, with the curtains tightly drawn to keep out daylight. He slipped off his boots and placed them by the door, then quietly padded inside, closing the door behind him. Moving carefully, he made his way to the bed with sock-covered feet. Standing beside the bed, he saw Claire asleep under the sheets, her gentle breathing filling the quiet room. He lingered for a moment, letting his eyes roam over her face, thinking about the changes he would need to make and how much this was about to reshape his life. Turning away, he headed to the bathroom, peeling off his clothes along the way. He opened the drawer and found the housekeeping team had kept fresh toiletries, including new toothbrushes just for him. Taking one out, he brushed his teeth and then stepped into the shower, letting the warm water wash over him as he scrubbed himself clean. After his shower, he found a neatly folded set of pajamas in the closet and slipped them on. Returning to the bed, he carefully eased himself in beside Claire, pulling her into his arms and pressing a gentle kiss on her hair as she snuggled against him. His mind drifted to the turn his life was taking, memories of his past rising unbidden, making his heart race. He could only hope he would be able to give Claire what she needed, and that he could keep her safe. Settling in, he held her close and drifted off to sleep, his arms wrapped protectively around her. Claire stirred awake sometime later, shrouded in darkness. It took her a moment to remember where she was, and she inhaled deeply, savoring the fresh floral scent that filled the room. She felt herself wrapped in a warm embrace, and tears pricked the back of her eyes. Gently, she craned her neck to look back, letting her eyes sweep over Charles's face in loving adoration. She wondered if Jake had told him, and if he had, then maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay if Charles was there, holding her. She turned in his arms to face him, raising her hand to trace a finger over his thick eyebrow. His face broke into a soft smile as his eyes fluttered open, gazing into hers with that familiar, dark, brooding intensity, as if he were holding on to a secret he could never reveal. "You found me," Claire whispered. "I'll always find you, baby, keep you safe, and give you everything your heart desires. But you have to trust me. Trust me enough not to keep secrets from me," Charles replied, his eyes searching hers with a quiet urgency. "He told you then," she murmured, lowering her gaze to hide the emotions swirling within her. Charles repositioned himself to place a finger under her chin, making her meet his gaze. "He didn't," he answered softly, locking his eyes with hers. "I'm sorry. I should have been paying closer attention. As soon as he told me he had brought you here to Miss Jonas, things started to click. But why didn't you tell me, Claire? Didn't you want to keep the baby? He asked, needing to understand. That's not why I didn't tell you. I would never get rid of my baby, she replied quickly, pulling back slightly to put some distance between them. I'm sorry. I had to ask, he said gently. Claire nodded, looking down. It didn't seem like you wanted more from me than companionship. I didn't want to ruin what we had, she explained quietly. That's a valid reason, Claire, but I'm not a kid. Let's not go through that again. No more secrets. If there's something you need, or anything you're worried about, call me. Talk to me, Charles said firmly. Claire nodded and looked up at him. Does that mean you'd like to raise the baby with me? She asked, her heart racing, knowing his answer would change everything for her. There's no other option, he replied, giving her a searching gaze with furrowed brows. We'll need a bigger place before the baby's a toddler, and definitely if there are siblings. But for now, it's safest if we stay here. For you and the baby, he added. Claire heard his words, talking about building a home together, hinting at more children, but she couldn't ignore the way he'd started with, there's no other option. Nothing he said implied he truly felt for her the way she wanted. Her chest tightened with pain and she turned away, hiding the hurt in her eyes. Early on at the concierge medical unit, Jake, who hadn't slept a wink in hours, finally nodded off with his head resting on the edge of Evangeline's bed, her hands still clasped in his. Sometime later, a firm tap on his shoulder stirred him awake. Blinking, he sat up, realizing he'd dozed off. His eyes went first to Evangeline's face, she was still asleep, and then to the monitor, relieved to see all the vitals in a steady blue with no alarming sounds. The nurse he'd seen earlier was still there, seated in the corner, her gaze fixed on someone behind him. Jake turned and saw Sean standing there, his dark eyes stormy as they shifted between Jake and Evangeline. Sean? Jake said, frowning, still groggy from the lack of sleep and irritated by the interruption. As he blinked, he remembered that Sean had told Nathaniel Hawthorne that he would be coming by. Jake's expression hardened, recalling Sean's previous attempts to insert himself into Evangeline's life. Can I have a word? Outside, Sean said, his voice low and cold, the last word carrying an unmistakable hard edge. Jake carefully disentangled his fingers from Evangeline's, not wanting to wake her, and gestured to the nurse that he'd be back. He followed Sean outside, noting the rigid tension in Sean's posture, his hands clenched into tight fists. The unit was quiet, but as they passed another privacy shield, Jake caught a glimpse of Justin Graham with his son. The cold air hit Jake's face as they stepped outside, the sky already dimming. He glanced at his watch and was surprised to see it was already 5 p.m. Sean led him further away from the entrance, finally stopping about 100 meters from the unit. Jake joined him, standing side by side in silence. Without looking at him, Sean said, I found out you're married to Dr. Hart. His voice edged with accusation. Jake arched an eyebrow, giving him a sidelong glance. And what's that to you? Jake responded, keeping his tone neutral and detached. I knew Dr. Hart, Sean replied, turning to face Jake. Okay, Jake said, sounding unimpressed. Do you think she deserved to be used as Julia's replacement? Sean asked. Jake, initially taken aback, couldn't believe Sean's audacity, especially knowing he tried to do just that to Evangeline. Do you even hear yourself, Sean? He shot back. So you think I'm being irrational for implying you were obsessed with my wife? Sean retorted. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, trying to suppress his frustration. Is this going anywhere, or should I just save myself the headache and walk away now? He asked, no longer hiding his irritation. All right, Jake. Maybe I'm being a little off with my questions, but can you explain why there's a grave next to John Davies's at his house, with my wife's name inscribed on the tombstone? And why does the Davies estate, properties, companies, shares list you as some kind of custodian? Can you explain that to me, Jake Darfield? Sean pressed. Jake didn't hesitate, knowing that any delay would make Sean think he was trying to cover up a lie. There's a grave because I buried her there, he said. Sean's face drained of color, his eyes wide with disbelief. And I'm the custodian of her family's estate because I paid off her father's debt, Jake added, watching as Sean's expression darkened with fury. It was my duty to bury my wife, my responsibility to buy back her family's estate, not yours. You'll sell everything back to me, and I'll have rightful ownership of it, Jake growled. Sean, no amount of money in the world is going to make me do that, Jake replied coldly. You have some nerve burying my wife behind my back, Sean hissed. Your wife? The same woman you let your insane family murder in the most brutal, unforgiving way? Jake yelled. That was none of your business, Darfield. Sean snapped back. Oh, of course, you would have preferred I let her be discarded, burned and dishonored after you abandoned her to die. Jake growled, seizing the chance to voice his anger. Sean reacted instantly, striking Jake across the face, his voice raw with emotion as he shouted, I had no choice. Jake felt the metallic sting of blood in his mouth from the blow and grinned, the cold, menacing kind. He'd been waiting for an opportunity to finally strike the bastard, and Sean had handed it to him on a silver platter. I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. Jake growled as he grabbed Sean by the front of his jacket and headbutted him. Sean felt dazed for a moment, his head lolling from Jake's unexpected retaliation, but then he let out a furious growl, lunging forward and grabbing onto Jake, attempting to headbutt him. Jake dodged the attack, swerving to one side before delivering a punch to Sean's jaw, sending blood and saliva flying from Sean's mouth. In response, Sean rammed into Jake, bending over and using his left shoulder as a buffer while he wrapped his arms around Jake, struggling to lift him. With a surge of strength, he managed to hoist the hefty man about half an inch off the ground, but Jake brought his elbow down hard on Sean's spine, making him grunt in pain. Despite the blow, Sean didn't let go, and Jake didn't relent either, striking with the intensity of someone finally releasing pent-up rage. You freaking a-hole! You led her to her grave, indulging her, pandering to her bullshit until it was too late, Jake snarled, each word punctuated with a heavy punch to Sean's face or back. The relentless blows forced Sean down to his knees, the weight of Jake's fury overwhelming him. That moment of defeat caused Jake to drop his guard, and with a roar, Sean grabbed his legs, yanking him to the snow-covered ground. Sean quickly straddled him, ripping off his jacket and throwing it aside before unleashing a flurry of punches at Jake, not caring where they landed. Shut up! Sean roared repeatedly. Jake raised his arms in defense, letting them absorb the brunt of the assault. He waited, biding his time until Sean's punches began to falter. Then Jake seized his chance, tightening his fist and delivering a powerful blow to Sean's face, leaving him momentarily stunned. With a surge, Jake tackled Sean off him, forcing the other man to the ground. He grabbed Sean by the throat, fists flying as he mercilessly battered Sean's face, blood splattering everywhere. Meanwhile, Justin, who had heard the sounds of fighting, came out from the concierge medical unit to see what was happening. Startling to a stop, he gaped as he saw Jake repeatedly beating Sean. Concern etched on his face, he instinctively moved to stop the fight, but Adam and Will, standing by with 5 other Hawthorne guards, blocked him. You can't just stand here. He's going to kill him, Justin protested. Nah, he's just going to beat him within an inch of his life, Adam replied with a casual note. Probably give him a jaw reset, Will added. It's a good thing we have surgeons in the house, another guard remarked. Justin gave them an incredulous look. Surely you can't be serious, he retorted, but the men merely shrugged dismissively. Setting his jaw with determination, he tried to step past the guards to stop the fight, but Will put a hand in front of him. They both need this. Trust me, Will said. Justin cast a searching, worried gaze in the direction of the fighting men. Please put an end to this. I have a boy here, he implored. Adam let out a sigh and stepped forward, and all the men moved in unison, walking toward Jake and Sean. All right, children, that's enough, Will called out in a loud, stern tone. Before the Hawthorne guards could get to them, Jake had beaten Sean to the point that the other man could no longer move. Leaning close to Sean's battered and bloodied face, he hissed, You should know she didn't die in that park. She lived, but with no memory of who she was. She even tried to start a new life away from here, surviving the scars and trauma your murdering bastard of a father caused her. Then your aunt found her and had her stabbed with a poisoned knife. She was comatose for months before she died in a hospital bed. That's why I slit Anne Cavalier's throat. You piece of shit knew how insane your family was and did nothing to protect her. And yet you have the audacity to speak to me about her. I swear on my mother's grave, Kimura, if you ever mention Julia to me again, I'll slit your throat and no one will ever find your body. Jake pulled back just as the others reached them and began to walk away, striding past Will as if the other men were invisible. Sean let out a shaky breath, his shoulders trembling as he cried. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Julia, I'm so sorry," he cried softly. Adam, Will, and the others moved to help him up. Sean let out a pained cry as they lifted him. Every part of his body throbbed, and his face felt numb from the agony. Taking one look at him, Will turned to one of the guards and said, "Get Dr. Rowan." Sean wanted to tell them to let him go, feeling he deserved every bit of the agony. Jake's confession, confirming what he had suspected, echoed in his head. The part about Julia losing her memory brought back the vacant look she'd given him in the park, the way she'd looked at him as if he were a stranger. It all makes sense now. Her surviving the ordeal and trying to start a new life explained why there had been no body, and why his men hadn't been able to locate her remains or find the so-called bounty hunter his father had hired. But the thought that, after all that, she'd still ended up being killed by his aunt made his heart ache. "Let me go," he grunted, trying to shake off the men holding him up. "Hey, cut it out!" Will snapped close to his face, his eyes cold and menacing. "You all knew, didn't you?" "That's why I always get the feeling you don't like me much," Sean said. "We don't like you, Sean, because you stood by Davies to hurt Dr. Hawthorne. In case you've forgotten, Aidan got shot because of it. Boss might be willing to forgive you because of your grandfather, but that doesn't mean we've all suddenly developed amnesia," Will retorted, his tone calm but firm. Sean jerked out of their grip, and, though it was excruciatingly painful, he forced himself to walk ahead of the men. "What do you all know? She was everything to me, and when you love someone that deeply, you give them what they want. Was I in on her wanting Nathaniel's money and hurting Dr. Hawthorne? Yes," he said, and Will's fists clenched in simmering anger at his admission. "Do I regret it? Yes, but I can't go back and change things. It's not in my nature to dwell on the past. It's done. It's over. I lost her. You can all take pleasure in that fact." With that, he continued to trudge toward the unit, each agonizing step dulling, if only slightly, the pain in his heart. He walked past Justin, his face set in determination, needing the physical hurt to numb the one inside. A few minutes later, a puzzled Dr. Rowan and Dr. Williams hurried back into the concierge medical unit, where they were directed to a makeshift privacy shield fashioned by Nurse Esther and Nurse Paul. Walking through the entryway, the two men halted, mouths agape as they took in the sight of Sean. He looked up at them, one eye half shut, and could tell from their shocked expressions just how bad he looked. "What happened to you?" Rowan asked, his voice filled with concern. "You were fine just a moment ago. I literally just saw you," Williams interjected, then turned to Will, who was standing near the entryway. "What happened to him?" he demanded. Before Will could respond, Sean said, "I was in an accident, sorry." He met Will's cold, detached gaze, then looked away as Will lowered his eyes. "You heard the man, Dr. Williams. Accident, he says," Will replied, then turned and left. Rowan quickly sprang into action, walking over to the bed to begin examining the extent of Sean's wounds. Sean noticed Williams taking out his phone, and he knew the older man must be thinking of calling Nathaniel. Fearing that Nathaniel didn't know about Julia, and not wanting to stir up bad blood that seemed to be dispelling between him and Nathaniel, Sean pleaded, "Please, Dr. Williams, leave it alone." With furrowed brows, Dr. Williams lowered his phone. Jake, who had returned to Evangeline's bedside, paced restlessly, the turmoil inside him still swirling. He stopped when the nurse assigned to Evangeline returned. Returning to his seat by the bed, Jake tried to calm himself, but then he saw the woman bring a chair and place it beside him. His brows furrowed as she extended her hand, and he raised a puzzled gaze at her, his blue eyes locked with her dark ones. "Excuse me, but let's clean you up before she wakes up and gets scared half to death," she said with a teasing tone. Jake lowered his eyes and extended his hands for her to clean the blood off. The sting of antiseptic on his bruised skin was sharp, but he didn't flinch. Instead, his gaze drifted back to the subtle curve of Evangeline's stomach. He appreciated the nurse's quiet professionalism, grateful that she didn't try to make small talk. She was right. He didn't want Evangeline to wake up and see him covered in blood. He looked down at his clothes and winced when he saw they were splattered with blood. He thought about leaving to go and change, but the idea of leaving Evangeline alone while Sean Cavalier was still around unsettled him. When the nurse finished cleaning his cuts, including the one above his right eyebrow, she stood, disposed of the waste, and returned the chair to the corner before sitting down again. "Thank you," Jake murmured, his voice low. The nurse nodded in response, then pulled out a book and began reading. The title almost made him smile despite his mood. Suddenly, Jake heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see Adam walking in with a bag. "Change, you look like shit," Adam said, tossing the bag at him before turning and walking away. Jake sighed. Back at the Hawthorne household, Arya stirred awake, feeling well rested, with her eyes still closed, a pleased smile spreading across her face as she recalled just how creative Nathaniel had been earlier to give them both relief. She wasn't sure if that was the reason she felt so content, but she reveled in the memory anyway. Her gaze drifted open, resting on the bedside clock, and her eyes widened in alarm as she saw it was 6 p.m. "Holy!" she exclaimed internally, bolting upright. Then she realized she was no longer in the old room but back in their suite and thought Nathaniel must have carried her up there while she was asleep. Across the room in the sitting area were Nathaniel, the twins, 3 baby strollers, Alex, Anna, Ethan, and Isla. Ethan lay on the couch with his head on Isla's lap, while Alex sat on the area rug with Anna and the twins. Mason, Landon, and Esme weren't immediately visible, so she guessed they were in their strollers. Nathaniel, seated in a reclining chair with a laptop on his lap, looked at his screen with ardent focus, and Arya guessed he must be working. She let out a relieved sigh, thinking all was well, and her babies were fine. As if sensing her gaze, Nathaniel looked up, and a hooded smile lit up his face. Arya felt a blush creep onto her cheeks, guessing at his thoughts. She giggled softly and lowered her gaze, the sound drawing Liam and Owen's attention. After whispering to Anna and Alex, the 2 boys bolted over to her, climbing onto the bed to throw their arms around her neck. Arya hugged them close, peppering kisses on their faces, which made them giggle quietly. "Mum, stop!" Owen protested in a soft tone between laughs, while Liam continued to chuckle. They pulled her out of bed to join the others. Arya gave Nathaniel a wink, making him chuckle, and she then knelt to wrap Anna in a hug and press a kiss on Alex's forehead before moving over to Ethan and Isla. Noticing Ethan was asleep, she smiled at Isla, who wore sunglasses despite being indoors. Arya guessed it must be for the twins' benefit, hoping they hadn't said anything insensitive to the poor lady. She reached out, gently squeezing Isla's hand before asking softly, "Hello, Isla, how are you?" Her voice was low and warm, yet Ethan's eyes fluttered open, and he smiled as Arya tapped the tip of his nose. "I'm getting better thanks to you, Dr. Hawthorne," Isla replied shyly. She started to see shadows, not complete darkness, Ethan rasped, his voice still groggy. Arya smiled at the news and sighed with relief. "That's wonderful news, Isla, and please, call me Arya," she said. Isla nodded, though she wasn't quite sure she could. Dr. Hawthorne was her boss's wife and a respected professional, so calling her Arya felt a bit awkward. The fact that she was right there, in proximity to her boss, was already making her nervous. "And you, Ethan? How are you feeling?" Arya asked, gently pressing a hand to his forehead. "I think I might have overdone it earlier, but I'm fine," he replied, looking a bit sheepish. Dr. Rowan had to give him another tranquilizer to help him sleep," Alex added. "Just ignore him," Ethan interrupted quickly. Arya chuckled, standing up as the 2 engaged in light banter. Liam and Owen followed their mom over to their dad and watched as she leaned down and kissed him on the side of his face. The twins made a little yuck sound as Nathaniel cupped her jaw and kissed her fully on the lips. Arya and Nathaniel laughed. "How are you feeling now?" Nathaniel asked, his gaze searching hers. "I feel great," she replied. He raised an eyebrow, giving her a knowing smile that made her giggle as warmth crept up her cheeks. "Stop it, Nathan," she whispered. "But what did I do?" he fired back, feigning innocence. The twins looked from one to the other with ardent curiosity. Arya fought back a laugh and avoided meeting his gaze. "What are you working on?" she asked, glancing at his screen. "Checking out the venue for the shares auction," he replied. "Are you planning to go?" she asked, meeting his gaze with anxious intensity. "We need to be there, honey," he replied. "Nathan, you can't take on anything strenuous just yet." "You need to rest," Arya said, concern lining her voice now. "I have to be there, Arya." "We've delayed it long enough," Nathaniel replied, knowing her worries were focused on his health. But with recent reports of Powell's plans and the threat to Ethan's life, he knew they had to cover all angles. He could have gone alone to keep Arya safe at home, but he knew she wouldn't agree to that. So they'd just have to be fully prepared for anything. Meanwhile, Andrew was in his room with Anita when he received a call from Will. He'd decided to take the rest of the day off and spend it holding Anita close. Still floating with happiness over the news of her pregnancy, he thought he'd give her all his attention, at least for the day. He let out a sigh as he answered the call. "This had better be good," he grumbled. "So that's how it is now, old man," Will quipped. Andrew chuckled, relaxing a little at Will's tone. He figured whatever Will had called about couldn't be that serious. "What do you want, Will?" he replied, feigning annoyance. "Nothing. No big deal, just thought, since we're here, you might want the report before you see it with your own eyes," Will said hesitantly. "See what, Will?" Andrew's body stiffened, the tension mounting. "So, Jake and Sean got into a fight?" Will started. Anita, who had been listening, bolted upright, her gaze turning sharp, a gleam of mirth in her eyes that made Andrew frown. "Sean Cavalier got into a fight with Jake Darfield?" Andrew repeated, exasperated. "Please tell me it was just a little fight," Andrew implored. "Well, it is. Sean's still alive," came the reply. Andrew cursed under his breath. Anita burst into a fit of giggles, which earned her another frown from Andrew. She slipped out of the bed, grabbed a robe, and hurried toward the door. "Lord in heaven, Anita, where are you going?" Andrew asked, gazing at her in disbelief. "I just remembered I forgot to tell Arya about that thing," she said in a rush, evidently with the intent of confusing him, before quickly leaving. Andrew's shoulders shook as he laughed. Anita giggled to herself as she made her way to the topmost floor, hurrying toward Arya and Nathaniel's suite. She was delighted to hear voices from inside. It meant they had company. Knocking gently on the door, she pushed it open and peered inside, her face bright with smiles as her eyes scanned the room and landed on Arya. "Anita, are you okay?" Arya asked with concern. "Yeah, I'm good," Anita replied, barely able to suppress a laugh. She stepped inside, greeted warmly by Anna, Alex, and Ethan. Liam and Owen dashed toward her for hugs, and she quickly pressed kisses to their foreheads, making them giggle. After letting them go, she grabbed Anna's hand to pull her off the floor, then gestured for Arya to join them. Nathaniel shook his head, rubbing his face with his left hand, already sensing the women were gearing up for gossip. "I heard congratulations are in order," Nathaniel said to Anita, who blew him a playful kiss before dragging Anna and Arya away. Nathaniel chuckled. "Can we come too, Aunt Anita?" Liam asked curiously. "Girls only, honey," Anita replied, her tone light and playful. "That's not fair," Liam complained. Folding his arms across his chest in frustration, he turned to his father for support. "Right, Dad." Alex, Ethan, and Nathaniel exchanged amused glances before Nathaniel beckoned to Liam and Owen. "Come here, boys," he said, putting his laptop aside as the two ran to join him. Meanwhile, Anita led Arya and Anna into the walk-in closet. Turning to face them, she fought back a bubble of laughter, finally holding out her hand in a dramatic gesture. "Come on, spill it," Anna said, her curiosity barely contained. Anita burst out laughing and then managed to say, "All right, remember when we were talking about who would win in a fight between Sean and Jake Darfield?" Arya gasped in understanding, holding her hand up to her mouth. "Sean, the hunky, scary, mafia-looking guy?" Anna probed with interest. "Yeah, well, he's not so scary right now because, according to Will, he got into a fight with Jake," Anita whispered conspiratorially. "Who won?" Arya asked, giggling. "What do you mean, who won? Sean got a real ass-whooping," Anita said, her over-the-top dramatics sending Anna and Arya into fits of laughter. You should have seen Andrew's face when I started laughing, Anita added, grinning. He didn't get it at all. Team Jake, baby, woo-hoo! Their laughter echoed in the enclosed space. Wait, don't you think Sean could be, seriously hurt? Arya asked, trying to keep a straight face. Duh, Anna replied, rolling her eyes. Anita collapsed, laughing even harder. The men outside, hearing muffled laughter and hushed voices coming from behind the closet doors, shook their heads in amused resignation. A gentle knock sounded on the suite door and Andrew peered in. Uncle Andrew? Owen and Liam called out, waving enthusiastically. Andrew smiled warmly and waved back as he stepped into the room. Mind telling us why my wife is locked in the closet with yours, Andrew? Nathaniel quipped, raising a brow. Andrew rubbed a hand over his face, trying to stifle a laugh. Jake and Sean had a little disagreement is all, boss, he replied, downplaying the situation for the boys' sake. Nathaniel immediately caught on and chuckled, recalling how Arya had played a role in instigating the volatile situation. That's hardly gossip unless Uncle Jake said something really mean to Uncle Sean, Liam remarked with a puzzled frown. Owen nodded in agreement, his young mind working to figure out what Uncle Jake could have said to make the argument so amusing to Aunt Anita, Aunt Anna, and their mom. That must have been some argument, Ethan added with a grin. Nathaniel let out a long-suffering sigh. I just hope he's still alive. I'd hate to have to explain that to his grandfather, he said dryly, his statement deepening the twins' confusion. People can't die from an argument, Liam thought, his frown intensifying as he tried to make sense of it. I'm about to go find out, Andrew replied with a smirk. Let me come with you, Nathaniel said, rising to his feet. He turned to Alex and added, Alex? Silently inviting him along. Sure, Alex replied, standing as well. Can we come too, Daddy? Liam asked, his earnest gaze mirrored by Owen's hopeful expression. No, sons. I think it's best you stay here with your mom and Uncle Ethan, Nathaniel responded gently. Bending down, he pressed a kiss to their foreheads, trying not to dwell on their disappointed faces. Go on, be a good host to Aunt Tyler, Alex said in a hushed tone, bending over with his hands on his knees between the twins. Then, with a conspiratorial whisper, he added, She's Uncle Ethan's girlfriend. The boys frowned as they glanced in Isla's direction. Their Uncle Ethan had introduced her merely as Miss Isla Devereux. Alex tousled their hair and straightened up before joining Nathaniel and Andrew. The three headed out as soon as Nathaniel grabbed his jacket from the coat hanger. You do realize you just set Isla up, don't you? Nathaniel said quietly to Alex as they exited. Alex and Andrew laughed in response. Inside the suite, Owen and Liam approached their Uncle Ethan and his girlfriend, sitting down on the nearest couches. Uncle Ethan, Liam began. Earlier when you introduced Aunt Isla, you didn't say she was your girlfriend. How come? Owen nodded in agreement, his gaze fixed on the elegant woman wearing sunglasses indoors. He thought it odd at first, but reasoned they might be prescription glasses, even though they looked like typical shades. Who told you that? Ethan asked, arching a brow. Uncle Alex, Liam replied matter-of-factly. Of course, Ethan muttered, silently cursing Alex under his breath. A wry chuckle escaped him, despite the strain it caused on his side. My bad. Well, now you know, he said, his voice low and husky as his eyes sought Isla's face. He felt a pang of frustration as he couldn't make out her expression clearly, her emotions concealed behind those damn sunglasses. His chest tightened with emotions he couldn't quite name. He deeply wished to spend as much time with her as possible during the remainder of his stay in the United States. He didn't want to let himself think about what would happen after that. For now, he just wanted to focus on their recovery, spending time together, and nothing else. Isla felt warmth rising to her cheeks and neck at his response. She couldn't be sure, but she didn't think she and Ethan had officially labeled their relationship yet. Was he calling her his girlfriend because it was easier than explaining something more complicated? The thought left her flustered, unsure of what to make of his words. Aunt Isla, you're not supposed to let him do that, Owen pointed out, his tone carrying a hint of playful reprimand. Ethan groaned in response, the sound full of exasperation, which only made Isla giggle. She couldn't help herself, especially when Ethan shot back with mock annoyance. Don't turn her against me, Owen. I thought we were cool, he protested. Owen noted his uncle's expression of exaggerated betrayal and gave him a smug smile. Meanwhile, Nathaniel, Alex, and Andrew stepped out of the elevator and encountered Charles, who was descending the foyer stairs to meet them. Andrew had called Charles earlier to inform him about Jake and Sean's fight, prompting Charles to leave Claire and join them. He couldn't fathom why Sean would provoke a fight with Jake, of all people, especially given their history. It was as though Sean had handed Jake an opportunity to vent his pent-up rage. Charles hoped this wouldn't escalate into further issues with the Camoras. They couldn't afford more enemies, not with everything else they were dealing with. Charles was deeply worried about the state of things. Adding to his unease was Claire's lack of enthusiasm about her pregnancy. Despite their earlier conversation, she remained slightly withdrawn, and he couldn't figure out what he was doing wrong. She used to be fun and open with him. Was the pregnancy responsible for the change? He wondered if this was what their relationship would be like from now on. "Boss, Mr. Sterndale," Charles greeted as he joined the group. "How are you, Charles? Have you heard about Andrew and Anita expecting a child?" Nathaniel asked with a smile. "I'm fine, thank you, boss. And yes, I was there when he found out." "It's a fascinating coincidence," Charles began. "Coincidence?" Andrew repeated with interest. "Claire is pregnant too," Charles admitted sheepishly. "Whoa!" Alex exclaimed, grinning. "Really? Claire Sterling?" Nathaniel remarked in surprise, then added, "You've all just decided to take my wife's medical staff one by one, putting them out of commission. First Dr. Hart, then Anita, and now Dr. Sterling." His quip elicited laughter from the group. "I promise it wasn't planned, boss," Charles replied, chuckling. "Congratulations, man," Nathaniel said, extending a hand for a firm handshake. Alex mimicked the gesture while Andrew pulled Charles into a hearty hug. When Andrew drew back, Charles noticed him discreetly wiping tears from his eyes, and the sight stirred something in him. It made him a little emotional, as he understood Andrew's sentiment all too well. They were damned men burdened with nothing but a bleak future, yet now they seemed to be grasping a piece of the unattainable, a feeling only someone who had walked their path could truly comprehend. Nathaniel and Alex noticed the moment as well, exchanging a knowing smile. For Nathaniel, it brought a deep sense of accomplishment. He felt pride in his ability to transform these supposed instruments of doom back into men, into humans again. Upon arriving at the concierge medical unit, Andrew spotted Will waiting in front of the entrance with Adam and Ash. Ash quickly stepped forward to open the door for Nathaniel, a frown creasing his brows, his striking eyes dimming at him. "Boss?" he said, concern evident in his voice. Nathaniel chuckled. "You should see your face, Ash. Trust me, if there were even the slightest chance I couldn't make it here unaided and back to the house, Andrew wouldn't have let me leave my suite," he quipped, earning laughter from the others. Ash still looked skeptical, but stepped aside nonetheless. "Surely there was no need to involve the boss," Will whispered to Charles. "Oh, he isn't here because Sean got his macho ass kicked," Charles replied in an equally hushed tone. "He's here to make sure Jake hasn't dragged us into a Cold War with Samuel Cavalier." Will chuckled quietly as they all filed inside. Adam led the group to the privacy shield where Sean was being treated. When Sean saw Nathaniel, he let out a curse. "Come on, Will," he grumbled in exasperation. "Sorry," Will replied with a smirk. Nathaniel tried to keep his shock under control as he took in Sean's battered appearance. Sean's face was swollen and discolored, bruises turning it nearly unrecognizable. "What in the world?" Nathaniel muttered under his breath. "Can we not make a big deal about this?" Sean said, trying to downplay the situation. "Okay," Nathaniel began, his tone low and sharp. "Then explain to me what the hell I'm supposed to tell your grandfather when he sees you like this. What are you doing coming to my house and picking fights with my men?" he thundered, his voice echoing in the room. "He went to Chicago. He doesn't need to see me, okay?" Sean replied, avoiding Nathaniel's gaze. That statement confirmed Nathaniel's suspicions. When Sean had asked for Dr. Hart to come be his grandfather's caregiver, he'd lied. "Chicago?" Nathaniel repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. "His friend came for him," Sean admitted reluctantly, still avoiding eye contact. "Of course," Nathaniel replied curtly, taking a step closer. He slipped his hands into the pockets of his trousers and asked in a low, chilling voice, "Do you still want a free pass into my home, Sean?" Sean let out a resigned sigh. "I'm sorry, Nate, okay?" he said, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. A heavy silence followed his plea, during which Nathaniel keenly noted the absence of Sean's usual air of smug cockiness. Even his apology seemed sincere. Perhaps Jake really had beaten some sense into the idiot. "What are his injuries?" Nathaniel said, directing his attention to Rowan, who hovered on the opposite side of the bed, alongside Dr. Williams. Rowan adjusted his stance, responding with the efficiency Nathaniel expected. "Sean has a broken nose," he began, maintaining a professional tone. He also sustained injuries to his jaw, ribcage, and spine. Fortunately, none of the injuries were fatal. "We've treated him, but his ribcage and spine were under significant stress, so we recommend that he remain under observation to rule out any hidden complications or internal bleeding." Nathaniel's gaze didn't waver as he absorbed the information. His imposing presence filled the room with authority. "You've already treated him?" he asked, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Yes," Dr. Williams interjected. "He's stable now, but healing will take time. Given the nature of his injuries, it's best he stays for monitoring, at least for the next 48 hours. Nathaniel clenched his jaw as his eyes flicked to Sean lying on the bed. His expression remained unreadable for a moment before he made his decision. "No, he goes home." "Mr. Hawthorne," Rowan started cautiously, exchanging a glance with Williams. "With all due respect, discharging him this early could pose risks." Nathaniel's cold gaze made him pause his words. "Discharge him," Nathaniel continued, his tone brooking no argument. "Williams, arrange for a medical team to check on him daily if necessary, but he doesn't stay here. I want him sent home." "Nate," Dr. Williams tried to interject, concern etched in his features, but Nathaniel cut him off, turning his sharp gaze toward Sean. "How do you feel about being handcuffed to the hospital bed?" Sean understood the veiled message in Nathaniel's words. He didn't trust him not to do something reckless. Despite the harshness of it, Sean nodded, recognizing the concern beneath the brusqueness. "I'll go home," Sean replied quietly. "Maybe he can go to my hospital instead," Williams suggested, attempting to offer a compromise. Nathaniel shrugged non-committally. "He's your patient." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving no room for further debate. "Which privacy shield is Dr. Hart in?" Nathaniel asked. "This way, boss," Adam responded, guiding him forward. Nathaniel followed with the others close behind. As they reached the entryway to the privacy shield, Nathaniel stopped, his eyes landing on Jake sitting beside the young doctor. His eyes immediately assessed Jake, noting the wrapped knuckles and the thin plaster over his right eyebrow. Other than that, Jake didn't look as though he'd been in any serious brawl. Nathaniel silently cursed Sean for his foolishness in picking a fight with Jake. He truly hoped he would not put him in an awkward situation with Samuel Cavalier. At the sound of approaching footsteps, Jake glanced toward the door. He saw Nathaniel Hawthorne enter with Alex, Andrew, and Charles, while Will and Adam lingered near the back. "Boss," Jake began, rising to address him, but a faint sound from Evangeline interrupted him. His head snapped toward her as the Evergreen Memorial Hospital nurse hurried to her side. Jake held his breath as Evangeline's eyelids fluttered open. When her gaze landed on him, her face stretched into a radiant smile. Jake's heart stuttered, his chest tightening as his eyes stung with unshed tears. He wondered for the briefest moment what he'd done to deserve someone like her. Charles, observing the scene, felt a strange constriction in his chest. "She looks happy. She's like a damn fairy," he muttered under his breath. Andrew shot him a sidelong glance, his brow furrowing. Without warning, he grabbed Charles by the arm and pulled him out of the privacy shield to a considerable distance. Turning to face him, Andrew's expression was stern as he said, "All right, out with it. Doesn't Claire seem happy being pregnant?" Charles bristled. "What makes you think she isn't?" he fired back defensively. Andrew's lips twisted into a wry smile. "Oh, dear heaven, you idiot. What did you do?" His tone dripped with exasperation. "Nothing," Charles snapped, his voice low but tense. Andrew's eyes narrowed. "Run that nothing by me, Charles," he demanded, arms crossed and unyielding. Reluctantly, Charles began recounting how the previous night had unfolded, starting with the moment Jake had nudged him into realizing Claire was pregnant. He told Andrew how he had gone to join her, what he had said, the questions she asked, and his responses. Andrew stared at him in disbelief. Wait a minute. Claire asked if you'd raise the baby with her, and your answer was, there's no other option. Nearby Ash, who had been listening, burst into laughter but quickly coughed to cover it up when both men turned to glare at him. Flashing an awkward grin, he pointed toward the exit and made a swift escape. Hearing Andrew repeat his words out loud made Charles feel like a complete fool. The realization of how badly he'd handled the situation hit him even harder. I need to go, Charles stammered, stepping back before turning and hurrying out. Charles hurried past Ash, pausing just long enough to smack the back of his head. "Hey!" Ash exclaimed, glaring at him. "Snaughty little shit," Charles said over his shoulder as he continued walking. "Little? Really? I'm an inch taller than you, Charles," Ash shot back, his irritation evident. He hated being called little as a result of his age, but it was a sore spot he struggled not to react to, especially since it had followed him since joining the Hawthorne Guards. Charles looked back at him over his shoulder with a smirk. "Just because you're a big baby doesn't mean you're not a baby, Ash." He knew he shouldn't tease Ash about something so personal, especially since the kid didn't even know his own age or birthday, but Charles couldn't resist. Ash had laughed at him for making a fool of himself in front of Claire, and Charles wasn't above being vindictive. The little shit deserved it. Chuckling to himself, Charles enjoyed Ash's obvious frustration. "Baby, I'm freaking 20 years old," Ash barked in response. "I'm pretty sure you're 16, Ash," Charles teased, grinning as Ash let out a low growl of annoyance. "Leave him alone, Charles," Andrew called out, walking towards them after seeing Charles hit Ash. Charles laughed loudly, then jogged away before Andrew could get to him. Reaching Ash, Andrew placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Stop letting them get to you. If you keep showing them what bothers you, they'll just keep pushing those buttons," he advised. "Sorry, boss," Ash muttered, his voice low and rough. Andrew offered him a small smile and patted the back of his neck. "It's fine. How are things? How's school?" he probed with interest. "It's going great," Ash replied, some pride creeping into his tone. "I am beginning to think I can finish the degree in 3 years. Thanks for giving me time to study, boss, and nobody's called me the devil's child in months." He glanced at Andrew, a faint smirk softening his expression. "So I can't complain," he added. Andrew felt a tug at his heart. "I told you, kid. This place is all the home and family you'll ever need," he said gently. "Make the most of it." Ash nodded quietly, his gaze dropping. Andrew noticed his unusual indigo-colored eyes shift to a softer, deeper blue tinged with grey, reflecting the boy's subdued mood. Andrew had spent enough time with Ash to recognize how his eyes changed with his emotions. He remembered the fiery reddish-violet hues from the early days, anger and despair etched into every glance. Later, confusion brought out green and teal tones. But now, after a year at the Hawthorne estate, Ash's eyes often shone with bright blue or violet hues, signaling the happiness and contentment he'd finally found. It was a stark contrast to the broken boy they'd rescued, locked in a cage like an animal. Andrew gave him a final pat on the back before turning to head inside. Meanwhile, Nathaniel remained standing in the entryway to the privacy shield where Dr. Hart and Jake were. He felt like he was intruding, especially when he saw the way Dr. Hart's face lit up upon seeing Jake. A small smile played on his lips as he mused that if he'd known Jake and the young doctor had some kind of relationship, he wouldn't have wasted his emotions getting upset over Sean's text messages. "How are you feeling?" asked the nurse from Evergreen Memorial Hospital, stepping closer to check Dr. Hart's vitals. "Like I suddenly weigh 250 pounds, Dr. Hart quipped, drawing a chuckle from Jake. Her smile widened as she beamed at him. Nathaniel thought it was time to leave the couple to their moment, but he stepped in just as the humor in the room reached a comfortable pause. "Does that translate to you're fine, Dr. Hart?" he asked, his deep voice cutting through the air and drawing Dr. Hart's attention. Her relaxed expression immediately vanished. Straightening, she tried to sit up. "Mr. Hawthorne, you're here," she said with a touch of nervousness. Nathaniel quickly raised a hand, stepping forward. "Please, there's no need to get up," he said, his tone faintly anxious. "Actually, she does need to get up," the nurse interjected with a polite smile aimed at Nathaniel. "She needs to start sitting and walking to improve blood circulation." "Oh, of course," Nathaniel said smoothly, moving closer as the nurse assisted Dr. Hart into a sitting position. Jake stepped to her side, his heart hammering with mild anxiety, wondering if it wasn't too soon for her to start moving about. Nathaniel reached for Dr. Hart's hand. Her eyes widened nervously at the unexpected gesture. "Thank you," he said warmly. Then with a slight smile, he added, "You should know, by the time we're done spoiling you rotten, you'll feel like you weigh far more than 250 pounds. Evangeline blinked at him, her gaze uncertain but shining with a trace of amusement. Not entirely sure whether to be concerned or delighted, she smiled back. The light-hearted moment earned chuckles from everyone in the room. Nathaniel stepped back, letting go of her hand and meeting Jake's eyes briefly before turning and walking away. Jake leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to Evangeline's lips. "Give me a second," he whispered. She nodded, her radiant smile making him linger for a moment before he hurried after Nathaniel. Jake caught up with Nathaniel, flanking him on the left, while Alex walked to Nathaniel's right, and Andrew was beside Alex. Will and Adam trailed a few steps behind. Jake was well aware that Nathaniel would not approve of any show of violence, regardless of the circumstances, though he would never voice his disapproval in front of the others. Nathaniel valued level-headedness and self-control in his men, and fighting Sean Cavalier hardly exemplified those qualities. Knowing this, Jake spoke up, "I'm sorry, boss." Nathaniel cast him a sidelong glance, his tone cool as he asked, "Are you, though?" Jake didn't respond, recognizing the question for what it was. A trap. "Sorry to butt in," Alex interjected with a smirk, "but if Arya found the whole situation amusing enough to be locked in a closet with Anna and Anita cheering Team Jake, I'd say the guy probably deserved it. Maybe the real error was going for the obvious target." His face. "What?" Will chimed in from behind. "You're saying Dr. Hawthorne did what now?" The rest of the group burst out laughing. "Come on, and nobody filmed that," Adam added, feigning disappointment. Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing, but then he recalled the conversation in the car the previous day. Slowly, a grin spread across his face. Nathaniel, his expression deliberately serious, said, "I know you all think my wife is some kind of angel, but let me remind you of the days back at Harvard when she was literally a thorn in my side." Andrew cleared his throat, clearly stifling a laugh. Alex, however, couldn't hold back and burst out laughing. Nathaniel turned to Andrew, raising a brow as he asked, "You don't agree, old man?" His teasing tone only made the moment funnier. "I just, remembered it differently, boss," Andrew replied, his voice tinged with amusement. Nathaniel widened his eyes in mock betrayal. "You don't agree? With me?" He repeated, his tone laced with exaggerated disbelief. "I will not forget this treachery, old man." Andrew grinned, and the group erupted into even louder laughter, with Nathaniel scowling just enough to keep the mood light-hearted. After Nathaniel left with Alex and Andrew, Jake returned inside, hoping to avoid another run-in with Sean. Reaching the privacy shield where Evangeline was, he paused mid-stride. The nurse had managed to get her on her feet, and she was now walking gingerly around the enclosed space. Her back was hunched over, and both hands cradled her stomach protectively as if afraid the baby might fall out. The two women were engrossed in a discussion, their focus on the digital imaging display in the corner. Jake couldn't follow the medical jargon, but the blue indicators on the screen were enough to reassure him. Both his woman and their child were doing just fine. Nathaniel's earlier comment about spoiling Evangeline rotten flitted through Jake's mind, making him grin. Evangeline turned and caught sight of him. Her face, etched with the strain of walking, softened into a shy smile as he mouthed, "I love you." She felt warmth rise to her cheeks, her smile growing. The sudden addition of the baby's weight strained Evangeline's body, and she could feel every ounce of it. She imagined it wouldn't have been so pronounced if she had carried the baby from conception. Her body would have gradually adapted to the weight gain of each trimester, but now the abrupt shift felt like her body was protesting, her back aching in defiance. Still, she forced herself to take each step, knowing she couldn't just lie down and hope to stay healthy. She needed to keep moving, for her sake and Eli's. "Need help?" Jake asked. Evangeline rolled her eyes dramatically, pretending to be utterly exhausted, making the nurse chuckle. Jake joined in, his laugh soft but full of affection. After 5 minutes on her feet, Evangeline was relieved to sink back into the bed. Her chest rose and fell with the effort, but she could already feel her body beginning to adapt to the new life growing within her. Her breasts felt heavier and more sensitive, a tangible reminder of the changes taking place. Despite the discomfort, a quiet confidence settled over her. She knew Eli would be just fine. Jake stepped back, giving the nurse space to finish assisting Evangeline with cleaning up and changing into fresh clothes. "Dr. Hawthorne has put you on a light diet," the nurse explained, pulling out a list of recommended meals. "The kitchen has prepared a few options to see how your body reacts, ensuring both you and the baby are nourished." She handed the menu to Evangeline for review. Jake moved closer, glancing over the selection. Clear soups, broths, mashed potatoes, creamy oatmeal, soft scrambled eggs, yogurt, applesauce, and fruit smoothies. Evangeline quickly made her choices, opting for a bowl of chicken broth, a side of mashed potatoes, and a small portion of applesauce. The nurse nodded approvingly, jotting down the selections before excusing herself. Once Jake was alone with Evangeline, he sat down beside her on the bed, reaching for her hand and gently intertwining their fingers. "Looks like you're already getting the princess treatment," he teased, his lips curving into a playful smile. Evangeline giggled, her eyes shining as she met his gaze. A comfortable silence followed, the two of them simply looking at each other with pure adoration. "I honestly have no idea what to say to you right now. This is just..." Jake trailed off, gesturing dramatically as if his mind had been blown. Evangeline lifted her free hand, cupping his jaw to draw him closer. Holding his gaze, she pressed her lips to his in a tender kiss. Jake groaned softly, releasing her hand to cradle her face, and deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "You know," Jake quipped, his voice slightly husky, "for someone who just underwent major life-altering surgery, you sure know how to invite trouble." Evangeline giggled and playfully nipped at his bottom lip. "Eva," Jake groaned in warning, though the mischievous sparkle in her blue eyes made him chuckle. Wanting to wipe the smug satisfaction from her expression, he leaned in and captured her mouth again. She gasped, allowing him to explore her mouth with his tongue. A soft moan escaped her as he gently nibbled her lips, the sensation sending a shiver of pleasure through her. Her breathing grew ragged as Jake finally pulled back, leaving her dazed. Looking into his warm, intense gaze, Evangeline felt a surge of overwhelming emotions, stronger than ever before. Her hormones, heightened by her condition, were in overdrive. "Kiss me again," she whispered, her fingers tangling in his shirt as she tugged him closer. Jake didn't hesitate, obliging her with a passion that mirrored her own. Unbeknownst to them, Sean, who had been on his way out, decided to take a detour to the privacy shield where Dr. Hart was, leaving Dr. Williams waiting at the entrance to the concierge medical unit. As Sean reached the entryway to the privacy shield, he paused, his gaze falling on Jake and Evangeline, completely lost in each other. His jaw clenched as he fought to rein in the surge of emotions that swelled within him. Seeing Jake living the life that should have been his was a bitter pill to swallow. With deliberate effort, Sean turned and walked away, his steps slow and measured, each stride an agonizing challenge. Yet, he welcomed the pain. It was a distraction, a way to stop himself from feeling anything deeper. Charles ascended the stairs to the Hawthorne household, heading toward his old room. He unconsciously acknowledged the silent serenity of the hallway, and slowly an unsettling feeling settled over him, as though the calm itself was a threat. The prickling unease gradually gripped him, sharpening his senses. He turned to glance over his shoulder, half expecting someone to be following him, despite knowing no one was there. He took a deep, calming breath, trying to dispel the feeling. Getting to his door, he turned the knob, pushing it open without bothering to knock. He would like to blame the familiar surfacing of his PTSD on the memory of the first time he'd walked down this hallway, led by Tom Hill and Andrew. Yet, He knew that the true cause of his unsettled soul was the reappearance of the bastard who had once again entered their lives, dredging up his past and unfinished business. He forced his mind to focus on the room's interior, his gaze settling on Claire, who appeared to be asleep on the bed. Her soft, rhythmic breathing, the gentle rise and fall, was the confirmation of his observation. Although he was a man who had been forced to hone his patience over time and had learned to appreciate its advantages, he couldn't suppress the gnawing feeling that he needed to resolve the issue between him and Claire. He figured if Andrew was right, the last thing he wanted was to let the misunderstanding linger any longer, keeping both him and Claire miserable. He removed his boots, placed them by the door to the right, and locked the door before approaching the bed. "Charles?" Claire's voice broke the silence as she sat up. "Did something happen?" she probed, her voice filled with concern. Charles realized she must have noticed his hasty departure earlier, even though he thought he had been subtle. "Do you remember Sean Cavalier?" Charles asked. Claire nodded, but then seemed to realize the room was dimly lit, and he might not see her clearly. "Yes. I hope he's okay," she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "No, he's not," Charles answered, watching as Claire reached for the table lamp, casting a warm orange glow over the luxurious room. "What happened to him? Is Yen still around?" "Do they need me?" Claire asked quickly, moving to get off the bed. Charles gently placed his hand over hers, stopping her. He knelt beside the bed, meeting her gaze, holding it firmly. "He'll be fine. Rowan and Williams took care of him," Charles said, his voice steady and reassuring. Claire nodded. "What happened, though?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "He got into a fight with Jake Darfield," Charles said, a smirk tugging at his lips. Claire's eyes widened. "Oh boy, you don't seem too bothered by it," she observed, offering him a subtle smile and a searching look. "No, he had it coming," Charles replied, his smile deepening as he met her gaze. "But enough about Sean and his stupidity. Why don't we talk about why you've been so distant with me, honey?" Claire blinked and lowered her eyes. "Oh, no, you don't," Charles muttered, gently lifting her chin with his finger to make her look at him. "I said something that upset you, didn't I?" he asked softly. "If you did, I don't remember it," Claire said, trying to mask her emotions. "Come on, baby. Earlier when you asked if I would raise our child with you, and I said there's no other option. Do you understand what I meant, babe?" Charles asked, his voice soft but insistent. Claire averted her gaze, her lips trembling slightly, betraying the emotions she was trying to hold back. "I'm sorry, baby, but you need to know this," Charles continued. "Come on, Claire, you must know. From the first day I invited you back to my place, and every time I brought you there after that, didn't you realize it? Didn't you see that I couldn't stop? That I wanted you close? Always?" he asked, his tone gently probing, his eyes searching hers for understanding. Claire met his gaze, the sincerity in his eyes making her heart stir, the walls around it shaking with hope. Charles studied her closely, then added, "I may not be overly romantic, and that's probably because I haven't had much practice in that area." Claire offered him a hesitant smile, raising one hand to gently trace the side of his face. "And the fact that I can feel again, and be with you, that's nothing short of a miracle," he continued. "So I beg you, darling, if I do or say something crude or insensitive, believe me when I say I'm just clueless." He grinned unabashedly, making Claire giggle lightly. Charles silently blessed Andrew 1,000 times in his mind as he watched the gleam of happiness return to Claire's eyes. "When I said I have no other option, I meant that you're mine now, Claire. You're my family, along with the child you're carrying. There's no other option but to be a family because I'm not letting you go. Do you understand, baby?" he explained. Claire nodded, tears falling from her eyes. Charles pulled her close and kissed her gently. A shiver ran through him when the tip of her tongue traced his upper lip, making him pull back and sit on the bed. He lifted her into his arms, enveloping her in a hug, and their kiss deepened, becoming more intense and passionate. "I'm in love with you, Charles," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "Oh, Lord," Charles murmured, his voice low and full of emotion. Her words took him by surprise, making him feel as though a surge of electricity had raced through his body, awakening his senses. "You've done it now, Claire," It's you and me from here on, he rasped against her lips. And our baby, Claire added, her voice thick with feeling. And our baby, Charles agreed. I love you too, Claire. I was terrified when Jake told me he brought you here. I thought you were leaving me. Claire took a shaky breath and kissed him with fierce intensity. Charles wrapped one arm around her back and used the other to edge them to the center of the bed, surrendering to the overwhelming passion between them. Meanwhile, Aidan was driving Noria to the concierge medical unit to see Dr. Hart. She hadn't yet seen her since the night before, when she had undergone the surgery. As they rode, she interlaced her fingers with his, lifting their clasped hands to her lips and pressing a gentle kiss to the back of his hand. Aidan smiled softly and brought their joined hands closer to his lips, returning the gesture by kissing the back of her hand and the promise ring he'd given her the previous day. She had been overjoyed when she realized he was serious about waiting for her, and he still remembered the gleam of surprise in her eyes when he slid the ring onto her finger. He had kissed her afterward, reaffirming his commitment, and the memory of her tearful yet radiant expression filled him with warmth. Now, looking at her, she radiated such bubbly happiness it was as if she could barely contain her excitement. Aidan noticed she hadn't brought up the job she'd lost due to the surrogacy surgery for Dr. Hart. He liked to think it was because she trusted him now, rather than avoiding the topic for another reason. When they arrived at the concierge medical unit, Aidan parked the jeep in front. As they stepped out, they saw Anton arriving with Dawn. Aidan smiled as he got out of the jeep and opened the door for Noria. She stretched up on her toes to press a kiss to his jawline before hurrying off to join Dawn. He watched her run ahead, feeling a quiet satisfaction that she was beginning to integrate herself into life on the estate. The two women quickly disappeared inside, leaving Aidan and Anton trailing behind. When they all reached the entrance to the privacy shield where Dr. Hart was stationed, their smiles broadened at the sight of Jake. Then the ladies rushed inside to quickly hug him before going to greet Dr. Hart. Jake strode toward Aidan and Anton, offering firm handshakes before pulling them into quick hugs. "Congratulations, man," Aidan said warmly, his words full of genuine emotion. Anton echoed the sentiment with a similar handshake and embrace. Meanwhile, back at the Hawthorne building, Nathaniel, Alex, and Andrew entered the elevator, ascending to the top floor. As the doors slid open, they were greeted by the sight of the family gathered in the living room, watching a movie and sharing dinner. The atmosphere was warm, though Nathaniel immediately noted Isla and Ethan's absence. Aria's eyes lit up with relief as they landed on Nathaniel, her worry melting away. Nathaniel caught her gaze and returned a warm smile, silently reassuring her. "I think Ethan's retired with Isla," Alex murmured to Nathaniel. "I was thinking we could tell him about the Blackwoods tonight." "What about the Blackwoods?" Ethan's voice cut in from behind Alex, startling him. Ethan had returned with Isla after Anita had gone to his room earlier to administer his medication. His tone was casual but tinged with curiosity. Alex turned, as did Nathaniel, both now facing Ethan's bemused expression. "We need to talk, Ethan," Nathaniel said in a low, firm tone. Ethan didn't like Nathaniel's tone of voice, or the way he and Alex were looking at him now. "You guys realize I just lost my mother, right? In the wake of this damn accident," Ethan said in a low, hushed tone, feeling Isla tighten her hold on him. He supposed she too understood that he was human, damn it, and could only take so much. "Come," Nathaniel said, gesturing with his head towards the inner suite. Alex reached forward and patted Ethan lightly on the chest. "This can't wait any longer. Sorry, man," he said. Ethan drew a shaky breath. Alex met Ethan's eyes, then pointedly looked in Isla's direction, silently asking him to let go of the lady so they could talk in private. Ethan nodded, then gently guided Isla to one of the couches. Aria noticed them and quickly joined them. When Ethan met Aria's eyes, the gleam of apprehension in them made her brows furrow. He gestured to Isla and Aria nodded. "Excuse me for a bit, I'll be right back, baby," Ethan whispered close to Isla's ear. She nodded in understanding, her brows furrowing in concern. He helped her sit down, pressed a kiss on her lips, and gingerly walked away. Aria allowed her eyes to trail after him, watching as he went into the room with Nathaniel and Alex. She wondered what that was about. Settling beside Isla, Aria reached out to hold her and asked, "Tell me how you're feeling. Has anything changed?" Her tone was friendly yet professional, laced with genuine concern. Nathaniel led Alex and Ethan into his late father's private library, flipping on the lights as he strode into the chilly room. Unlike his father's home office on the ground floor, this room featured only his private collection of books, arranged neatly on a sturdy bookshelf along one wall. Opposite it, a liquor cabinet stood against the wall, complete with a bar counter and tall stools. At the center of the room was a seating area, furnished with dark brown leather couches arranged around a mahogany coffee table. Overhead, a chandelier hung directly above the table, casting a muted glow. "Help yourself to a drink if you want, Alex. Ethan and I can't drink alcohol," Nathaniel said, making his way to the room's heater. He switched it on, gradually warming the space to a more bearable temperature. "Don't mind if I do," Alex said, striding to the liquor cabinet and pouring himself a drink. Meanwhile, Nathaniel approached a painting hung on the wall, carefully removed it, and revealed a safe embedded in the wall. Opening the safe, he retrieved a parcel and a letter marked with Ian Blackwood's name. Ethan watched Nathaniel with a wary gaze, his good hand tightening reflexively at his side. As Nathaniel crossed the room and handed him the letter, Ethan accepted it as though it were a live grenade. Holding Nathaniel's gaze, Ethan asked with a biting edge, "What's this, man? Some secret my mom needed me to know after she was gone?" His voice was devoid of humor, his eyes even darker. "You want to play 20 questions, or are you going to read the damn letter?" Nathaniel scoffed impatiently. Without another word, Ethan tore open the envelope with his teeth, holding it up with his good hand toward Nathaniel and Alex. A silent declaration that he wasn't afraid of whatever they'd thrown at him. But as he lowered his eyes to the letter's contents, the first words hit him like a freight train. "I'm sorry, son," began the letter, signed at the bottom by Ian Blackwood himself. Ethan's hand trembled, and he dropped the letter as though it had turned into a rattlesnake. Staggering backward, his eyes hardened into ice as they flicked between Nathaniel and Alex. "How many times do I need to tell you two that I don't want to be reminded that I'm remotely related to that bastard? How many times? Damn it!" Ethan growled, his rage palpable, vibrating through the room. "He willed his money and property to you," Nathaniel said calmly, placing a document with a parcel on the coffee table. "Everything he owns," Alex added, stepping away from the bar and slipping a hand into his pocket. "What?" Ethan's voice rose in shock before he shut his eyes briefly, trying to regain composure. When he opened them, his tone was sharper, colder. "I don't want anything from him." Nathaniel shrugged, unbothered. "You may not, but the die is cast." "What does that mean?" Ethan demanded, his suspicion rising. Nathaniel didn't reply immediately. Instead, he unlocked his phone, pressed play on a video, and handed it to Ethan. Ethan's breath hitched as he watched the screen. It was footage of the day he drove Isla back to her apartment. The video showed his Jeep at the intersection, then a monstrous truck with a reinforced metal bonnet guard barreling out from the curb, not even on the road, and ramming directly into his car. He watched the horrifying impact as the truck hit, causing the Jeep to tumble violently. The truck then reversed and sped off without hesitation. Ethan's heart jolted painfully, his frame trembling as he absorbed the harrowing footage. His breathing grew shallow, his heartbeat hammering loudly in his ears. Slowly he sank onto the armrest of one of the leather couches, his hand gripping it for stability. "It wasn't an accident?" he asked, his voice a strained whisper. He needed to hear it aloud. "No, it wasn't," Nathaniel confirmed grimly. Taking back the phone, he swiped to an enhanced image of the truck's driver. He handed it back to Ethan, who stared at the screen. Ethan's breath caught again, his good hand tightening into a fist. He would recognize that side profile anywhere. The bastard had haunted his teenage years, tormenting him and his brothers relentlessly. The man in the picture was Benedict Blackwood, Ian Blackwood's supposed first son. "If they're willing to do this to you, imagine what Ian must have been going through for him to make this move," Alex said, his tone dark. "Yeah, well, it's called karma," Ethan replied automatically, his voice thick with rage as memories of Benedict and his brothers flooded his mind. Those bastards had nearly traumatized him when he was young, made his mother's life a living hell, showed up at her burial to throw insults, and now tried to kill him and Isla, the poor girl who had done nothing but defend him. Just when he thought it was all over and he had left that life behind, Benedict pulled this shit. Ethan stood up, his anger boiling over, and began to pace like a caged animal. His gait was halting, his wounds slowing his steps, but the fury in him was undeniable. "What's the plan?" Ethan demanded, his voice tight as he continued pacing the room, each step reverberating with tension. "Read the letter, Ethan," Nathaniel ordered firmly, settling into one of the leather couches. Alex, seemingly indifferent to the charged atmosphere, returned to the bar to refill his drink. Grabbing the letter from the coffee table, Ethan began pacing again, his eyes scanning the contents. The first 2 paragraphs were nearly impossible to stomach. Ian Blackwood had filled them with apologies, confessions, and explanations. He admitted to all the pain he had caused Ethan's mother, justifying it as the product of his jealousy and bitterness. Ian acknowledged the hypocrisy of his actions, being with another woman while resenting her for being with another man, but claimed he had been too blinded by his own anguish. Ethan read those lines twice, each word stoking his resentment. Then he moved on to the more startling revelations. Ian had detailed his wealth and declared Ethan his heir. It was all legal, the letter stated. Ethan was no illegitimate child. Ethan's pace slowed as his pulse quickened. He stopped in his tracks when he reached the part about Ian and his mother's marriage. Ian claimed it had been legal, a ceremony in Vegas that was both a promise and binding. Ethan's breathing grew shallow, his chest tightening as tears blurred his vision. The following words hit him harder than he expected. "You have nothing to be ashamed of. You can claim your rightful place as my son and the sole heir to the Blackwood fortune." The letter ended with Ian apologizing again, the tone of his farewell heavy with finality, as if he knew his days were numbered. Ethan's grip on the paper tightened as he asked, without looking up, "Do you know what's wrong with him?" Though his gaze stayed fixed on the floor, it was clear he was addressing Nathaniel. Nathaniel leaned forward slightly, his tone measured. "I needed you to read the letter first, Ethan. Now tell me, do you need a moment? This time I'm respecting your choice." Ethan let out a scoff, the sound harsh and sharp. From the bar, Alex chuckled lightly, raising his glass. "Oh, you're respecting my choices now, are you?" "This is coming from a guy who just ordered me to do what I clearly said I do not want to do," Ethan retorted, his tone laced with sarcasm as his fiery gaze locked onto Nathaniel's, anger and disbelief simmering in his expression. Nathaniel shrugged nonchalantly. "Yeah. Because the next time you get upset like that and start cursing at me, I'll pound you to a speck of dust," he retorted. Alex burst into laughter, the sound breaking the tension in the room. Ethan shook his head, lowering his gaze briefly before raising it again to meet their eyes. "Did you guys read this?" Ethan asked, his tone probing. "I did," Alex admitted without hesitation. "Sorry, man, but it was the only way we could figure out what this was all about before making you read it." Ethan nodded slowly. "Thanks, man," he said, his voice quieter now. His gaze flicked down to the letter before he looked back up at Nathaniel. "I'm sure you want me to take a stance, to go back there, claim my birthright, take pride in my name, and give my mother the honor she deserves. I know you, Nathaniel. You'd revel in this kind of payback, especially against that bitch Diana, who took pleasure in dragging my mum's name through the mud even after taking her man. But part of me just wants to leave it all behind and let the police deal with Benedict. And yet, I know you two won't let me do that, will you?" Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. Nathaniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I'm petty. Sue me," he quipped, a smirk tugging at his lips. Alex chuckled. Nathaniel's expression hardened slightly as he continued. "That coward tried to kill you and my employee, who was under my responsibility. You know me too well to think I'd let something like that slide. So, we're doing this for Isla then?" Ethan asked, arching an eyebrow, his voice tinged with dry humor. "And your mum, of course," Nathaniel added. His tone lightened as he leaned back. "Also, I think it'd be the perfect location to let the ladies have their bachelorette party, far away from any damn strippers. Just snow and isolation." "Amen to that," Alex chimed in enthusiastically. Despite himself, Ethan chuckled, the tension easing slightly in the room. "How can you literally have everything, money, power, looks, and still be jealous?" Ethan asked Nathaniel. So what would you love to see a grown man dangling his junk in front of your woman? Nathaniel countered. No, Ethan replied, disgust etched on his face. Does that mean you're insecure? Jealous, maybe? Nathaniel pressed. No, it just means I don't like it, Ethan shot back. There's a word for that. It's called being possessive. Ariana is my woman. It's disrespectful for some random hold to be flaunting himself in front of her. It doesn't mean I'm jealous or insecure. It means I'm territorial. Now, I do not disregard my wife's independence or her ability to set her own boundaries. I'm not crazy, but it still doesn't take away the fact that she's mine, Nathaniel declared firmly. Ethan shook his head. You're lucky she doesn't mind, he replied dryly. That's because she knows I'm hers too, and I wouldn't disrespect her like that, Nathaniel said. It's just harmless fun, Ethan defended. Nathaniel wasn't surprised. Ethan always had a protective instinct toward Arya like a brother, and Nathaniel appreciated that, but he knew better than to let the two know that. Do you think Arya would see a female stripper grinding on me, giving me a lap dance as harmless fun? Nathaniel shot back. I think she'd grab a baseball bat, Alex chimed in. Exactly, Nathaniel said. She'd come at me with a bat because she knows I'm hers, Nathaniel said. Alex grinned, made a fist, and held it out to Nathaniel. Nathaniel mirrored the gesture and they bumped fists. Say it loud and say it proud, Alex chimed in. Ethan rolled his eyes and waved them off. After a brief pause, he locked eyes with Nathaniel, then glanced at Alex. All right, what's the plan? He asked. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. First, we're going to give all those documents to Tom Hill. He'll enforce them while you heal. When you're ready, we'll head to Sylvan Ridge. In the meantime, I'll figure out what's wrong with Ian and see if it's not too late to help him. I've also got a few loose ends to tie up here, just waiting to heal first, Nathaniel explained with determination. Out of the wire. Anton, who had been about to start the car, froze. His heart lunged in the wall of his chest. He must have sent this to me by mistake. Out of the wire? Maybe he meant to send it to Andrew. Babe, what do you think? Dawn asked, turning to Anton, but before she could get an answer, Anton was already out of the car. He hurried to her side, opened her door, and beamed at her with a bright smile. Babe, do you mind driving back to the apartment with Noria? Anton asked. Without waiting for her response, helped her out of the car and began steering her toward Aiden's car. What? Why? We were just... Anton, stop. What's going on? Dawn demanded, her voice rising in confusion as he half-guided, half-carried her toward Aiden. Nothing. I just remembered I was supposed to attend a meeting. I bet Aiden forgot too. Andrew's going to have our heads, Anton said quickly, managing to sound sheepish. Dawn's brows furrowed in bewilderment. Anton hadn't mentioned any meeting before, and she had been looking forward to a quiet dinner with him at his apartment. Anton, she grumbled, stomping her foot in frustration. Anton stopped, drew her close, and pressed a quick kiss to her lips. I'm so sorry, baby, he murmured, his voice soft and apologetic. Aiden, who had just opened the driver's door of his car to get behind the wheel, saw Anton and Dawn approaching. He paused, his brows furrowing in concern, and walked over to meet them. Aiden, we forgot that meeting with Andrew. The one about the Code Red situation with security, Anton said, his voice sharp as he gave Aiden a pointed look. Aiden's eyes widened as realization struck, but within seconds his expression shifted, and his gaze became unreadable, devoid of any emotion. He turned his attention to Dawn. I hope you can drive? He asked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Yes, Dawn replied, her tone disheartened. Aiden gestured for her to follow him to his car and helped her behind the wheel. What's going on? Noria asked hesitantly. They forgot a meeting, Dawn muttered, her tone low and disappointed. Noria sighed. All right. You two take care, Aiden said, meeting Noria's gaze. She nodded in response. Head to the apartment, please, Anton added before Aiden shut the door. The two men stepped back and didn't wait to see the car pull away. Who's in danger? Aiden asked, his tone tight with tension. Tom Hill. He sent a voice message to Dawn saying, out of the wire. Shit, Aiden cursed under his breath. Out of the wire was a marine phrase indicating that someone was outside a secured zone, typically in hostile or dangerous territory. I'll get Jake, Anton said before sprinting back into the concierge medical unit. Aiden wasted no time pulling out his phone and calling Andrew. Early on, as Tom exited the Hawthorne office building, he climbed into the car readied for him by the Hawthorne guards. He had decided to stop by the courthouse to collect some pending documents related to the Darfield Company's new formation, which he had been informed were ready. As the car pulled away, he mentally reviewed his schedule. Upon arriving at the courthouse, Tom stepped out quickly, informing the guards that he wouldn't be long. He hurried up the stairs, his mind focused on the task at hand. Reaching the courthouse lobby, he headed straight for the clerk's office. However, just as he was about to enter, he noticed two men following him. Lowering his gaze discreetly to survey the surroundings, he realized there were more than just two. Their movements, nearly synchronized, bore an uncanny resemblance to the precise, almost robotic strides of the Hawthorne guards. An unmistakable hallmark of military training. Tom's instincts sharpened. He had no shortage of enemies, but he couldn't immediately discern who this latest threat might be from. Keeping his composure, he pulled out his phone, pretending to receive a call. With practiced ease, he recorded a voicemail and sent it to the first three contacts on his messaging app: Nathaniel, Andrew, and his daughter Dawn. He hoped that if Nathaniel and Andrew didn't see the message promptly, Dawn would. And if she did, he prayed she would be with Anton. "Mr. Hill," a familiar voice called from behind him. It had been nearly 20 years, yet Tom recognized it instantly. How could he not? The voice had a peculiar quality, calm, unbothered, and chillingly nonchalant. It was the perfect tone for a killer devoid of conscience or honor. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. This was far worse than anything he had anticipated. The man behind him wasn't just dangerous, he was a cold-blooded madman. Slowly, Tom turned to face him, his sharp gaze locking onto the figure before him. He was, however, taken aback. The tall, virile young man he remembered was gone, replaced by a gaunt figure with the sickly pallor of someone wasting away. The transformation made Gaius Draven's cold, dead eyes even more haunting. "Gaius Draven, this is rather surprising. It's been so long," Tom said, keeping his voice steady despite his unease. "You're right, it's been too long," Gaius replied, his raspy tone as unnerving as ever. "What brings you to New York?" Tom asked, his tone conversational but laced with caution. "Work and personal interests." Gaius smirked, stepping closer. "I see," Tom said with a practiced frown. "Anything I can help with?" he added, his words carefully measured. Gaius beamed, a chilling expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad you asked. It saves me the trouble of having to threaten you, Mr. Hill. I'm sure you know I'm not here for chit-chat." The casual mask slipped from Tom's demeanor. "Threaten me? Whatever for?" he retorted, his voice sharp. "Ah, there he is, the true nature of the fox," Gaius said with a sly grin, reaching out to place a hand on Tom's shoulder. Tom didn't flinch, meeting Gaius's gaze with unwavering defiance. "Don't worry, Mr. Hill, I won't kill you, at least not yet," Gaius said, the menace in his voice palpable. Tom scoffed, a deliberate act of defiance. The reaction seemed to amuse Gaius, who discreetly pulled out a gun and pressed it hard against Tom's stomach. The pressure drew a pained grunt from him, but he refused to show fear. "Don't push your luck, Mr. Hill," Gaius taunted, his voice icy. "You might think you're untouchable because of the puppets you surround yourself with, but I'll show you just how easily your puppets can be taken out, one by one." Tom's jaw clenched, anger flickering in his eyes. "What do you want?" he ground out, his voice low and seething. "I have an employer who needs Dr. Hawthorne. He wants her taken and brought to him." Now, a little birdie assured me it's impossible to get to Dr. Hawthorne. "But you? Quite easily," Gaius said with a menacing grin. Tom's mind raced at the revelation. The weight of the words made his stomach churn. He dreaded even asking who this employer might be. "So, Mr. Hill, you're going to call Dr. Hawthorne and convince her to come get you herself. Otherwise, I will kill you," Gaius said, his tone dripping with deadly intent. Tom's gaze hardened, his sharp wit cutting through the tension. "You know, for someone so adamant about pursuing your own personal agenda, I'm surprised to see you're nothing more than a puppet yourself," he shot back. The grin on Gaius's face widened as he pressed the gun harder against Tom's stomach, making him take shallow, measured breaths. The bastard was enjoying this. "Trust me," Gaius growled through gritted teeth. This is far more personal than you could ever imagine. Now I need you to walk with me. Otherwise, I'll kill every single person in this courthouse and drag you through their blood on my way out." Tom's mind worked frantically as he tried to anticipate their next move. He assumed Gaius and his men would lead him through the front door, where the Hawthorne guards were stationed, ready to intervene. But he was flanked on all sides and led instead down a hallway toward a private emergency exit reserved for staff. As they passed through the corridor, Tom's sharp eyes caught sight of 6 bodies, policemen and court guards, lined up against the walls, lifeless. "This has always been your problem, Gaius," Tom said, his tone calm and unbothered, though his insides churned. "You let your bloodthirstiness override your self-preservation. Surely you realize the authorities won't let this slide, right?" Gaius chuckled, a sinister sound that echoed in the hallway. "Or are you worried about me now, Mr. Hill? Don't be. I left enough clues for them to know exactly who's responsible." Tom's lips tightened into a thin line. "Where are you taking me?" he demanded as they forced him into a black van. "Didn't I say? To my employer," Gaius replied with a smirk before the doors slammed shut. Tom understood the gravity of the situation as soon as Gaius led him into the Powell residence. However, it was the sight of Christine descending the stairs, looking entirely unbothered by the intrusion, that truly unsettled him. As Gaius and his men brought him inside, Tom quickly pieced together the puzzle. Christine was likely the birdie who had provided Gaius with information about him. Yet, Tom knew Christine had to be aware of the Hawthorne guards' unwavering loyalty. They would burn the Powell house to the ground with him inside it, before allowing any harm to come to Dr. Hawthorne. And Nathaniel? He wouldn't even need to give the order. That realization left Tom with one conclusion. Like Gaius, Christine had her own agenda. She didn't bat an eye as Tom was dragged into the sitting area and forced into a chair. One of Gaius's men stepped forward, handcuffed him, and retreated. Tom's gaze remained steady as Christine threw Gaius a dismissive look, her tone cold as she said, "Excuse us, please." Tom noticed the brief flicker of annoyance in Gaius's eyes as his jaw clenched. Still, the man gestured for his men to follow, and they began filing out of the room. Christine strutted closer to Tom, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Without warning, she slapped him hard across the face. The sting of the slap burned, but Tom only smirked, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. "You bastard, you used me. You made me believe Jake Darfield married me, making a damn fool of me." Christine growled, leaning in close, her voice trembling with fury. Tom caught Gaius's approving grin from the corner of his eye before turning his full attention back to Christine. "Used you?" Tom replied with a raised brow. "Come now, Miss Powell. Surely you mean we both used Jake Darfield, don't you?" His voice calm but cutting through her indignation like a blade, Christine's fiery demeanor faltered slightly, her indignation simmering down. "You got what you wanted," Tom continued, his tone icy. "He got nothing, not a penny. I don't think you're in any position to be upset." Christine's jaw tightened as her hands clenched into fists. "I love him," she spat, her voice breaking slightly. "I genuinely love him, and you tricked me into thinking I was his wife. I went to get a copy of our marriage certificate, only to be humiliated when they couldn't find such a thing. Everyone looked at me like I was crazy, like I was delusional." Her voice rose as anger bubbled over. "I should have known it was all a big lie. Was Nathaniel in on it too? Was the whole explosion part of your damn charade?" Tom's smirk deepened. "I'm sorry to tell you that the explosion was a direct result of your family's legacy, Miss Powell," Tom began, his voice calm but cutting. "And make no mistake, you were the target, not the Hawthornes. Believe me, the terror those men felt when they saw that car blow up was very real. Nathaniel almost had a heart attack. What happened, Miss Powell, is that you showed your cards too soon. You revealed who you really are, and that changed everything." Tom noted the confusion and uncertainty etched on her face, her composure faltering. "And I don't know whose idea it was to orchestrate this little stunt," he continued, his tone icy. "But in your misguided quest to get back at me, or whoever you've decided to blame for simply being you, you've started a war you can't even begin to comprehend." "What are you talking about?" Christine snapped, her frown deepening. Gaius Draven is a madman, Tom jeered. And trust me, he's not here to simply do your bidding, he added, his tone hardening. Gaius Draven is under my grandfather's command. He'll do as he's ordered, Christine retorted, her voice rising in defiance. Is that so? Tom countered smoothly, leaning back in his chair as far as his restraints allowed. Then I suppose your grandfather gave him the authority to murder 6 police officers and courtroom guards. Christine's eyes widened in shock. She physically recoiled at his words, but quickly looked away as if trying to mask her reaction. Are you done with him? I'd like to get on with what I'm actually paid for. Gaius's voice cut through the tension as he strode back into the room. Tom held his breath, his gaze locked on Christine, waiting to see her next move. He said you killed 6 police officers and courtroom guards, Christine said, her features carefully schooled into neutrality as she directed her gaze toward Gaius. That wasn't part of the plan, she added in a non-committal tone. Your grandfather paid me to get the job done. Don't question my tactics, Gaius retorted, his voice low and laced with menace. That's reasonable, Tom interjected, his tone dripping with sarcasm, but did she know she and her family would be taking the fall for the crime? Before Tom could say more, Gaius reacted swiftly, backhanding him across the face. The force split Tom's lip and blood trickled down his chin. What exactly does he mean by that? Christine demanded, her tone hesitant now, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Miss Powell, Gaius replied coldly, you're asking too many questions. Are you going to be a problem? Because I suggest you put this one to rest. Tom began to laugh, a low, mocking sound that filled the room. I hate to say I told you so, he quipped, though his bloodied lips curled into a humorless smile, his eyes glinting with dark satisfaction. Mr. Powell is being prepared for the surgeon's arrival. It's not really a good time for visitors, the other man interjected. Christine's jaw tightened. Okay, am I being punked? Because I sure as hell don't need your permission to see my grandfather. Move out of my way right now, or get the hell out of my house. She bellowed, her voice ringing with authority. The 2 men exchanged uneasy glances, but before either could respond, the door behind them creaked open. At the same time, a familiar voice behind Christine said, Miss Powell, come now. They're just doing their job. If you need someone to yell at, it should be me. Christine spun around to face Gaius, his smirk infuriatingly smug. The man in a doctor's coat standing behind the guards looked visibly uncomfortable. Please, Mr. Powell would like to see his granddaughter, he said quietly. Without a word, Christine shoved past the 2 guards, ignoring Gaius as she entered her grandfather's suite. The room reeked of antiseptic mixed with an unsettling scent of illness. Her grandfather was hooked up to an oxygen mask, his frail frame a shadow of his former self. His skin was ashen, and dark shadows circled his sunken eyes, giving him a ghastly appearance. What's the matter, girl? He rasped, his voice weak and strained through the breathing aid. Christine stepped closer, forcing herself to meet his eyes. I need to talk to you about Aunt Diane. She's done something terrible. Something that could ruin our family's name for good this time, she said, her voice steady despite the rapid thudding of her heart. She held his gaze, praying he still had enough clarity to understand what she was doing, especially since there was no Aunt Diane in their family. The air in the room was thick with tension, and she could feel eyes on her. Gaius stood by the doorway, undoubtedly listening to every word. Christine's pulse quickened as she realized just how precarious their situation was. With these men occupying their home and only the regular household staff present, they were dangerously vulnerable. She couldn't predict what Gaius might do next, and the thought sent a shiver down her spine. Diane, you say? Her grandfather repeated. Yes, Grandpa, Christine replied, with a firm resolve. Come closer, her grandfather rasped, motioning for her to approach. Then addressing the 2 doctors lingering nearby and Gaius with his men stationed by the door, he said, Give me and my granddaughter a moment. Christine held her breath, half expecting Gaius to object, but to her surprise, he didn't. The doctors exited, brushing past Gaius, who remained rooted in place. He lingered, his gaze locking onto Christine's in an unsettling, silent exchange, before finally stepping away and closing the door. Despite his compliance, a foreboding sense of danger settled over her. Christine quickly moved to her grandfather's bedside, leaning in close to whisper, "Gaius killed 6 policemen and courthouse security officers during Tom's abduction, and now he's torturing him, doing horrific things to him." Her grandfather's expression remained impassive. Perhaps if the man were more cooperative, Gaius wouldn't need to go to such extremes, he replied in an indifferent tone. Christine blinked, stunned by his response. She knew her grandfather could be ruthless and sometimes downright cruel, but he was never reckless. Calculating, yes, but never reckless. This was hardly the case or time for such behavior, and his lack of concern shocked her nonetheless. "So you're okay with this? You don't care?" she pressed, disbelief coloring her voice. The older man simply shrugged. Christine's frustration boiled over. "And you're fine with Gaius framing us for the deaths of those men? You don't think that'll tarnish our name and ruin us even if you achieve your goal?" she probed fervently. "No one can ruin us, girl. They can only try," her grandfather replied calmly. "As for Gaius, he's a rabid dog, yes, but he's my rabid dog, and he's on a tight leash." Christine hesitated, her apprehension mounting. "Are you certain, Grandpa? Because I doubt killing Tom will do anything to soften Nathaniel Hawthorne's hostility, and we need his wife's cooperation. How can we achieve that if we can't even approach her or gain leverage to compel her?" Her grandfather studied her intently for a long moment before nodding. "Fine. If Gaius fails to break that old fool within the next hour, you'll take over." Christine's heart raced as she tried to keep her composure. "Grandpa, I doubt Tom will survive another hour, and I don't think Gaius will give up control that easily." Tom said. Her sentence was cut short as the door suddenly swung open. Gaius entered, his presence heavy and oppressive, filling the room with tension. "Miss Christine, I believe you have a call," Gaius said. Christine gritted her teeth, locking eyes with her grandfather. "You're a Powell, don't forget that," her grandfather whispered. Christine nodded in understanding and gently patted his hand before standing. She waited by the door for the doctors to return before venturing out onto the corridor. Fully aware that Gaius was following her, she walked with great composure, wanting to be as unbothered as possible. As she approached the hallway leading to the stairs, she suddenly felt a firm grip on her wrist. She was yanked backward, her back slammed against the wall. "What the hell are you doing?" Christine snarled, though her heart pounded in her chest. She kept her composure, refusing to show any sign of fear despite knowing their vulnerability. "What I'm doing, Miss Powell, is giving you a second warning to remember your place." "Don't make me do it a third time," Gaius growled, his grip tightening. Christine's eyes narrowed as she stood her ground. "Be careful, Mr. Draven. I may be a woman, but this is my house, and you're just a hired hand. I should remind you not to forget your place, or your contract could be terminated." She snarled in evident outrage. "Terminated," Gaius repeated, a cruel, humorless laugh escaping him. But just as quickly as the unnerving laughter had erupted, it stopped. He slammed his fist against the wall beside her face with such force that it rattled the air. Christine blinked but didn't flinch, refusing to show weakness. "You've been warned," Gaius muttered, his voice cold before walking away. Refusing to give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd intimidated her, Christine followed Gaius down the stairs, which prompted him to pause so she could walk ahead of him. She acted as if he wasn't even there and made her way into the kitchen, calling out loudly, "I heard I have a call." The housekeeper looked confused by her statement, and the other staff exchanged uncertain glances before shaking their heads, equally puzzled. "I didn't think so," Christine replied, crossing to the landline. She picked up the receiver, held it to her ear, and said, "Nothing. No call. I guess Mr. Draven must have been mistaken." With a sharp exhale, she hung up and grabbed a bottle of water standing next to the housekeeper. As she took a sip, she murmured, "I've got a bad feeling. We're all in danger." The housekeeper gave her a look that said, "You're only just figuring that out." Christine sighed, then left the kitchen, heading for her grandfather's home office. After shutting the door behind her, she moved to the bookshelf on the right and pulled out a heavy Charles Dickens novel. The shelf slid open, revealing a hidden safe in the wall. She opened it to reveal stacks of cash, jewelry, passports, and a phone. Without hesitation, she grabbed the phone and dialed a number. Finding it was busy, she tried another one. Andrew's familiar voice filtered through. "This is quite unexpected, Miss Powell," he remarked. Christine didn't miss the sarcasm or the cold edge in his tone. "I need to talk to you and Nate," Christine whispered into the phone. "Well, you are in luck," Andrew replied. "You're on speaker now, he can hear you." Christine took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm sorry, Nate." Nathaniel's cold chuckle echoed through the phone. "Nah, you're not," he said, his voice icy. "But you will be. That I promise you. Hey." Christine put the phone back and locked the safe before stepping back to pull the Charles Dickens faux book. With a subtle click, the bookshelf shifted back into place, concealing the safe behind it. Moving quickly, she exited the room, striding past Gaius's guards stationed in the hallway. Silently, she noted their number and positioning, mentally cataloguing every detail as she walked. Once she reached her room, she locked the door behind her and headed straight to the bathroom. Stripping off her clothes, she prepared a scented bath, sinking into the warm water as her mind raced. She started to cook up a plan, but her heart pounded wildly, and no amount of controlled breathing could steady her nerves. After an hour of soaking, she finally felt a semblance of calm. Taking a shaky breath, she stepped out of the bath, naked, and patted her skin dry. Moving to her wardrobe, she selected a beige-colored lingerie set, sexy and form-fitting, and slipped it on. Christine tied her hair up in a sleek bun, exchanged her glasses for contact lenses, and spritzed herself with an alluring perfume designed to evoke a sensual pull. She studied her reflection in the mirror, adjusting a few strands of hair and smoothing the robe. Satisfied, she retrieved a thigh belt styled like a garter from her drawer. The belt featured a hidden pouch for a pocket knife and a slot for a vial of poison. She strapped it securely around her upper left thigh, concealing it beneath the delicate lingerie. Finally, she slid into a pair of bunny slippers, letting the soft soles ground her for a moment. With the robe cinched tightly around her waist, she headed out. She immediately noted that Gaius had stationed 2 guards in the hallway leading to her room. She strode past them as if they were statues, humming under her breath as though unbothered. Her robe hung open in front, revealing the swell of her chest and her long, slim legs as she took long, swaying strides. She felt the men's eyes burning holes in her, but she didn't break her elegant gait. Finding her way down the stairs, she saw 2 other guards in the living room by the entrance door. These ones were armed and ready, their guns visibly tucked into the band of their military cargo pants. Again, Christine acted as if she were unbothered as she made her way towards the kitchen. Upon reaching the kitchen, she saw the housekeeper there with 2 of the housemaids. "Can I have something to snack on?" she said in a mellowed tone, deliberately ignoring the guard standing by the kitchen's rear exit door. The man stood up as she entered, though Christine acted as if she couldn't see him. She noticed, however, that his eyes trailed down her body. The housekeeper gave her a displeased look. Christine could tell the woman must be thinking she was inviting trouble, and that was exactly what Christine was expecting. Trouble. "Yes, Miss Powell," the other woman replied with a nod. Christine asked for a glass and some wine to be brought to her in the greenhouse, then headed toward the kitchen exit that led to the side of the house. The guard by the door looked torn as she approached, his eyes blatantly leveled at her chest. "Do you mind?" she said, gesturing for him to leave the doorway. "I'm sorry, madam, no one is allowed outside at this time. Gaius's orders," he said. "Gaius!" Christine yelled, tilting her face to the side and calling over her shoulder without breaking eye contact with the man. She called 3 times before a loud growl came from the other entrance to the house. The door opened and Gaius yelled, "What?" The guard blocking Christine's way now looked quite uncomfortable. Christine smirked. "Your guard dog thinks I need a chaperone," she said in a honeyed tone. "Either provide me with one so I can move freely in my own damn house, or tell him to get the hell out of my way." She turned fully toward Gaius, giving him a full view of the front of her lingerie. Gaius's cold demeanor didn't waver, but Christine saw his eyes dart down her body. She pulled the flaps of her robe to cover her front, then folded her arms, giving him a leveled gaze. "Isn't it rather cold outside to be wearing your bedclothes, Miss Powell?" Gaius said, a tinge of suspicion in his voice. Look at me, thinking at my age I've got the license to do bad all on my own," Christine said, deliberately misconstruing his meaning. "But surprise! My private moral police. Murder! Why don't I come with you, Miss Powell? Gaius said with a hint of a leering smirk. Christine rolled her eyes and, without responding, turned to the guard by the door. I suppose you can relax now that I have a guard dog, she said. She heard Gaius growl deep in his throat in annoyance, but she ignored him. The guard moved away and Christine pulled the door open, stepping outside. The cold was unbearable, but she didn't act like it bothered her as she made her way toward the greenhouse. She saw 4 of Gaius's men patrolling the grounds, which made a total of 11, including Gaius, 12 in total. She headed toward the greenhouse and breathed a sigh of relief at the measured temperature inside. She went to grab gardening tools as Gaius entered after her. The tension in the air was palpable. What could you possibly want here in the middle of winter? Gaius asked, his suspicion still evident. Some of us have hobbies, came her simple reply. And you chose to do that in this weather? Gaius asked, his voice chilling and withdrawn. I suppose that's why it's called a hobby, Mr. Draven, Christine replied in a condescending tone. With her back to him, Christine didn't see Gaius move. He swiftly grabbed her around the waist with one hand and cupped her throat with the other, pulling her firmly against his chest. She gasped in surprise, but couldn't help but chuckle even as her heart pounded wildly. Watch how you speak to me, kitten, Gaius said, his voice low. I'm not one of your clueless houseboys. It would be a shame to tame that fiery spirit of yours, he threatened. And how exactly do you plan to do that, Mr. Draven? Christine replied, masking her fear as she slowly arched her back against him, prompting a grunt from him as his grip on her tightened. The door to the greenhouse swung open, and 2 of the kitchen staff entered, followed by one of Gaius's men. Gaius quickly stepped back, but not fast enough. The man saw them. Gaius shot Christine a dark look before walking away. Keep an eye on her, Gaius ordered his man as he left. The man nodded without a word. The staff quickly set up the snacks on a small table in the corner, placing a bottle of red wine and a glass. Just as they were about to leave, Christine stopped them. Could you bring one more glass cup? I think it would be in poor taste to drink while the poor man is left watching. The man objected, but Christine ignored him. Once the staff had gone, Christine busied herself with gardening gloves, pretending to tend to the flowers, well aware of the man's gaze. She let the jacket slip down her shoulder, revealing her skin as she moved, exposing herself in seemingly accidental ways. Soon, a maid returned with the requested glass. Thank you, Sarah, Christine said warmly. The maid nodded and quietly left the room. After a minute, Christine paused her gardening, wiping the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. She moved to the corner to wash her hands with water from the gardening hose, then returned to the table where the wine and glasses were placed. Lifting the bottle, she glanced at the man and asked, "Do you mind?" Holding the bottle out to him to open it, he hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward to take it. He opened the bottle, handed it back to her, and moved a few steps away. Christine sat down, poured herself a glass, and took a sip. She moaned softly, closing her eyes. This is divine, she added with a touch of theatrics. She pretended to take another sip before asking, How long do you think you'll be stuck here? Because, quite frankly, you all need to leave my property. The man gave her a steady look but didn't reply. You're really ruining my fun, Christine continued. I can't go anywhere, can't bring anyone in, and Gaius doesn't exactly scream start. She smirked. I mean, being the big boss and all, it'd be a real favor if he'd let me out to get entertained or be the entertainment. You get what I mean, right? She chuckled quietly. He's not the boss. We're partners, the man said, his voice low and firm. Liar! Christine shot back with a burst of laughter. It's obvious he's your boss. He ordered you to watch me, and here you are, standing way over there. You can't even share a drink with me. She raised an eyebrow at him. I know exactly what you're doing. I'm not stupid, he retorted. Gosh, I sure hope not, Christine said, her tone low and mocking. You're trying to help my grandfather to secure illegal transplants. You better be sharp, because I'm far too pretty to end up in prison. She winked. And did you catch my little hint about wanting some company? She noticed his eyes subtly trailing down her body, but he didn't move to join her. Ah, you're no fun, she said dismissively, downing her wine. She then stood up, deliberately strutting toward the garden. Turning her back to him, she slowly bent over. She held that position for a moment before straightening her spine and starting to walk back to the table. Before she could reach it, strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her against a firm, muscular body. "If you want fun, I can give you plenty of it, princess," he growled, his breath hot against her ear as he slipped a hand under her lingerie. Christine felt his body tremble, his breathing shallow, but she pulled back and said, "No, sorry, I wouldn't want to cause a disagreement between you and your bosses. Like I said, it's always best to go for the one with the power." She winked, blowing him a kiss, and turned to walk away, but he grabbed her again. "Are you toying with me?" he snarled with a darkened gaze. "Toying with you?" Christine repeated with a sneer. "Tell me, if Gaius walked in here right now and saw me doing this..." She braced herself, then stretched up to lock lips with him. She pulled back as quickly as she could, grinning at the shock in his eyes. And then he says, "Go lock her up in her room." She mimicked Gaius's raspy voice. "Wouldn't you follow his command?" She raised a finger to tap her temple. "Now, if I did that to Gaius, who would be giving him orders, huh?" She paused for effect, then finished with a smirk. "That's why it's smart to go for the boss." She turned and moved away. He followed her. "I told you we're just partners. The money from this gig is split equally," he retorted. "That still doesn't mean anything," Christine replied, sitting down and picking up a shrimp to eat. She ignored him for a while, but when he sat next to her and picked up his glass of wine, she held her breath. When he poured himself a generous amount of wine, she gave him a seductive grin. "I didn't catch your name," Christine probed with a smile, her tone light yet suggestive. "Theo," he replied simply. "Theo, sexy," she murmured in a sultry drawl, her eyes deliberately scanning his face as she caught his gaze lazily trailing down her body. When he reached for the wine bottle and poured more red wine into his glass, Christine feigned scandal, placing a hand over her chest. "Don't go getting drunk on me now." He scoffed dismissively. "This can't do shit for me. It's made for girls," he said. Macho and a sexist," she quipped, raising an eyebrow. "Just when I was thinking of putting you at the top of my fantasy lovers list," she quipped. "It doesn't have to be a fantasy," he countered smoothly. Christine let out a mock disappointed sigh, tilting her head as if deep in thought. "I don't think Gaius would let that happen. Let's just keep it in here," she whispered conspiratorially, tapping her temple with a manicured finger. "I can't stop thinking that someone with such an anger issue must be a beast in the sack," Christine said in a low, coy tone, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Theo scoffed. "You'll have to wait until after his surgery if you want a tamed beast. But you don't have to wait with me. I can be all the beast you want, princess," he said. Christine's heartbeat quickened. "Gaius needs surgery! For what? Oh, shit!" she thought, her mind racing in panic. Before Christine could think of a witty response to that, Gaius returned, his eyes narrowing suspiciously as they flicked between the two. "Join us," Christine offered, holding out her glass to Gaius with an inviting smile. He scowled, ignoring her gesture. "What are you doing?" Gaius barked at Theo. "Taking a break?" Theo replied defiantly as he stood, pushing his chair back with a deliberate scrape. "Taking a break, huh?" Gaius retorted, his voice dripping with menace as he glowered at Theo, then turned his ire on Christine. Christine let out an exaggerated sigh, rolling her eyes as she got up from her seat. Without a word, she sauntered past the two men and headed for the exit, her strides confident and unhurried. She half expected Gaius to try to stop her, but he didn't. As she walked away, she heard Gaius hiss, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Theo's voice followed, sharp and accusatory. "What am I doing? What are you doing, Gaius? Or did you think I didn't see you?" A smirk tugged at Christine's lips as she strode through the door. Not only had she sown discord in their so-called brotherhood, but she had also obtained viable information and what she'd come for earlier while feigning interest in the garden. Christine had harvested a lethal dose of aconitine from the tall monkshood plant hidden in a corner. Its deceptively beautiful hooded blue-purple flowers never draw suspicion. She had extracted the toxin from the plant's stem and roots, storing it in a small vial she now carried securely in her thigh strap. The stopper was tightly sealed, ensuring not a single drop would spill. Christine made her way back to her father's home office and locked herself inside once more. She quickly moved to the side bookshelf, pulling out the Charles Dickens book. As she did, the shelf slid open, revealing a hidden safe. She hurriedly opened it and retrieved the phone, dialing Andrew's number. He picked up after the first ring. "They're 12 in total. One of them is named Theo, and he mentioned something about Gaius needing surgery," she quickly explained. Christine's pulse quickened, hoping this would be enough information to get the Hawthornes involved. Earlier, when she had apologized to Nathaniel, his response had sent a chill through her. "You helped get Tom. You, Christine. I let you into my house. And you had the nerve to give information to entrap Tom. Do you even know who Gaius Draven is?" Nathaniel had raged. Christine had no choice but to apologize repeatedly. She couldn't admit her anger over discovering the fake marriage. After all, Tom had paid far more than necessary for that, and Tom had been right. She had gotten what she wanted, aside from Jake. "Please help me get him out. They'll kill him," she'd pleaded. "Listen carefully, Christine. If you think you can pull a fast one to get sympathy from me, you're wrong. You won't get any sympathy. You and your family are done. If Tom dies, you'll regret ever hearing the name Nathaniel Hawthorne." He had snarled. "Please help me get him out," she repeated, knowing there was nothing more to say. She just needed to get Tom out first. "What information do you have on these men?" Andrew had asked. "Who are they? Names? How many are there? What exactly does Gaius want?" he had pressed. "What do you mean, what Gaius wants? He's trying to get Ariana to agree to perform an illegal transplant for my grandfather," she replied, confused. "Miss Powell, Gaius doesn't take on projects without a personal interest. Find out what that is, then get back to us." "You have an hour," Andrew had instructed. Although they hadn't guaranteed their assistance, Christine was confident they would take action if she provided the necessary details. Now that she had some concrete information, she was certain they would make their move. "Can you describe the rest of the men?" she heard Charles's voice through the phone. "Yes," she whispered, beginning to describe the men. She was halfway through when she heard approaching footsteps. "I have to go," she whispered urgently, but before she could hang up, Andrew's voice cut in. "Try to get to Tom. Tell him it's okay. He should agree to make the call." Christine's brows furrowed in confusion. "What if he doesn't believe me?" she asked, her voice low and anxious. "Tell him we received his out-of-wire message and are ready," Andrew replied firmly. Christine ended the call, her mind racing. "Out-of-wire message?" she pondered in bemusement. She returned the phone to its place, locked the safe, and pushed the book back into position, causing the shield to grind into place. She quickly moved to the door, unlocked it, and opened it, finding herself face to face with Theo. His eyes were cold and calculating. "Hey," she said with a nervous smile. "I thought you'd be in your room," he said, eyeing her with suspicion. "I couldn't sleep," she replied with a forced grin. "Oh yeah? I've been thinking about our conversation in the greenhouse. What I said about Gaius," he began, his tone casual yet laced with menace. "Correct me if I'm wrong, but you seemed a little too fixated on Gaius. Care to explain what that was about?" He probed, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous timbre, his eyes sharp and deadly. Christine's heart raced at the direction the conversation was heading. Grimly, Tom said nothing, his gaze unwavering as Christine carefully cleaned and bandaged his injuries. As she moved behind him, she leaned in and whispered, "I have a message from Andrew." Raising her voice, she added, "Can you please untie him? This is unnecessary," she added. "He stays tied up," Gaius snapped curtly. Turning her back to Gaius and his men, Christine locked eyes with Tom and whispered urgently, "He said to tell you to make the call. They're ready." Tom's expression hardened, and he growled under his breath. "Do I look stupid to you, Miss Powell?" "Out of the wire," she murmured softly, securing a bandage around his temple. "They got the message. They're ready." This time, when she looked at him, her fear was evident. "I'm sorry, I didn't know they'd do this," she admitted, her voice shaking. "That's enough," Gaius barked from across the room. "It doesn't matter anyway. If he doesn't make that call, all your patchwork is useless," he shouted, his frustration ringing in the air. "Can you not yell at her?" Theo shot back sharply, his tone defensive. Tom Hill, quietly observing, locked eyes with Christine. She took a deliberate step back, raising her voice for everyone to hear. "You're right, Gaius, but I'm sure Mr. Hill would like to get this over with and go home. I, for one, would like to leave this house, so please, can we all just cooperate and get this done? Tom, catching on, nodded. Fine, I'll make the damn call, he grunted, his voice heavy with frustration. Every part of his body throbbed with pain. He couldn't even feel his face anymore, and he was certain his ribs were broken. He only hoped he wasn't falling into Christine's trap. Christine quickly moved to retrieve Tom's coat as Gaius stepped forward, pulling out his phone. Call the number for me, Gaius ordered coldly. Tom watched as Christine retrieved his phone from the jacket. Her eyes widened for a brief moment, but she quickly masked her reaction and hurried over to him. Perhaps it's better if he uses his own phone, she suggested. Gaius moved to snatch the phone from her, but Christine stepped back, scowling. She handed the phone to Tom instead. Tom noticed the phone was unusually warm in his hand, and a flicker of curiosity crossed his mind. Call Dr. Hawthorne directly, Gaius demanded, his voice sharp and menacing. Tell her to get to the Hawthorne estate gate. I have men waiting to pick her up. Make it clear she's not to tell anyone, or I'll kill you right here and now. Tom dialed Dr. Hawthorne's number, silently praying that Christine wasn't deceiving him. The phone rang twice before someone answered, but it wasn't Dr. Hawthorne. It was Tom's daughter, Dawn. Hello? A familiar female voice said on the other end. One of Gaius's men stepped forward, holding up a placard with instructions scrawled on it, gesturing for Tom to read the message. Tom pointedly ignored the note. Hello, Dr. Hawthorne. It's Tom Hill. Tom began, making sure his voice remained steady, despite the pain, not wanting to cause her any more distress. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm afraid I'm in a bit of a pickle, he continued. Mr. Hill, Dawn responded, her voice carrying a calm familiarity as she played along. Aren't you back home already? Her voice was laced with concern, and Tom heard the slight tremor in it. No, I'm sorry, I'm not, Tom continued, keeping his voice steady. I'm being held hostage at the Powell estate. What? Gaius snarled, striding toward Tom with fury in his eyes. But before he could reach him, Christine quickly stepped in front of Gaius, blocking his path. Move out of my way, Miss Powell, Gaius growled, his tone laced with menace. Theo immediately stepped up, positioning himself beside Christine. This is my mission, Gaius snapped, his frustration evident. We're done with this, Gaius. It was supposed to take 48 hours, and half of that time is already gone, Theo countered. Is anyone interested in hearing Dr. Hawthorne's response? Tom interjected, drawing everyone's attention. Relief washed over him, knowing Christine hadn't betrayed him. Yet a pang of anguish hit him, knowing his daughter was now involved in this dangerous game. Yes? Gaius barked impatiently. She agreed, Tom replied evenly. You can tell your men to pick her up. Gaius shoved Christine aside and lunged at Tom, seizing him by the front of his shirt. You told her where we are. Don't think for a second that you will get out of this, alarm. He snarled before pulling back and delivering a heavy punch to Tom's stomach, making him grunt in pain and fall over. Gasping for air and with chest heaving, Gaius turned and barked, We're moving to a new location. Christine quickly moved to Tom's side, seemingly to help him, but slipped a pocket knife into his hand. Breathing hard, Tom met her gaze with intense scrutiny. Meanwhile, outside the house, dark figures darted across the field, weaving through the manicured lawns and heading toward every exit that led out of the house.